2020 at 6:01. Okay, if you would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? We'll have Trustee Valerie Arkin lead us.
Thank you, President Maher. Please place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Trustee Arkin. At this time, I'd like to introduce our cabinet members and Board of Trustees. First, we have Julio Hernandez, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Ahmed Shiko Eslami, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Ed Dialazo, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Dr. Janelle Woodward, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Trustee Mark Miller, Trustee Joan Larson, Trustee Valerie Arkin, Board Vice President Jamie Yee, and I'm Board President Steve Maher, Superintendent Dr. David Hagelin, Patrick Gannon, Coordinator of Communication and Community Engagement, Roseanne Pryor, Administrative Assistant to the Superintendent. This special board meeting or work session for Tuesday, July 14th, 2020 will be conducted completely online. The Governor's Executive Order N-25-20 relaxes the Brown Act requirements for holding public meetings via teleconference. This meeting will be recorded and televised. Members of the public may attend via the public viewing link included on the online agenda posted on the district's website. Public viewing link will be provided via TV 28 on cable TV or by streaming from TV 28. Updated public comment changes due to COVID-19. For normal practice, the meeting will be live streamed and available at www.tv30.org for viewing and also broadcast live on Comcast TV Channel 28 beginning at 6:05. Online speaker slips will be available and the public will be able to call in using a computer or smartphone via a link which will be provided following submission of a speaker slip. A telephonic option will also be available. Once connected online in Zoom, the public speaker will be able to watch or listen to the meeting. When the agenda item upon which the individual would like to comment is addressed, the speaker will be announced in the meeting as to when it is his or her time to speak to the school board or board of trustees. The speaker will then be unmuted and will be able to comment. TV 30 is allowing only audio at this time, adding a full screen public comment when the speaker is talking. Yellow comment form for items only on this agenda. Individual speakers shall be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board on this item for the sake of time. Assessing closed captioning for board meetings. Visit the board agenda you would like to assess closed captioning for. Link to all agenda postings. Fill out the closed captioning request form. It's linked. We will follow via email with a link to access the board meeting via Zoom. Ensure that you have the most current version of Zoom installed on your computer or mobile device. Click on the Zoom meeting link prior to the start of the board meeting. Please use your full name when entering. At this time, I would like to report on the action taken in closed session. Item 2.3. On closed session item 2.3, the board voted 5-0 with the motion made by Trustee Larson and second by Trustee Arkin to approve a compromise and release agreement for internal case number SED 250.19.20 for the amount not to exceed $4,000. Item 2.4. On closed sessions, item 2.4, the board voted 5-0 with the motion made by Trustee Yee and second by Trustee Larson to approve a compromise and release agreement for internal case number SED 260.19.20 for the amount not to exceed $162,000 over a multi-year agreement. I'd like to look at the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll go ahead and move approval of the agenda.
Okay, a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. I'll do a roll call. Trustee Larson,
Aye.
Trustee Arkin,
Aye.
Trustee Miller is coming on. Trustee Yee
Aye.
and Trustee Maher, aye. Trustee Miller, have you joined us yet?
No, he's not. If we could get our friends at TV 30 to resend the link to Mr. Miller, that would be helpful.
But it passes 4-0 with one absent. We now begin our board study session. I would like to give a few seconds to get Trustee Miller on board. Please excuse the delay.
Thank you. Steve, just to recap for my notes, never mind. The agenda.
Mark on?
Not yet.
Okay. Although we are not beginning as yet, I'd like to make one comment regarding the item number 6. I would like to thank, and I know I speak for all the board, for the countless hours that the cabinet, under the direction of Dr. Hagelin and the direction of Dr. Woodward and all the other cabinet members and their directors, the countless hours that they have spent putting into this agenda item. I know they've spent way above. They've given up vacation time. They've given up nights. And then I'd like to thank all the teachers, parents, and community members who also joined in on putting this together. We are grateful. You have Mark?
I think Mark is on now.
Have you?
There he is.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay,
So
Dr.
thank you, President Miller. If I could ask Pam to go ahead and start driving the presentation, that would be awesome, and we'll move right into it. Going to the next slide, I'd like to echo Board President Maher's comments in regards to thanking all of the different people who participated in this planning process. And we've tried to give you some understanding of exactly how comprehensive the planning process was, including the steering committee with 25 members, including parents, community members, teachers, and classified staff and our admin team. But also the school reopening task force, which was over 100 members. Each of those two groups met more than 6 times because they both met today as well. And so they really have dedicated a huge amount of time and effort to the development of this plan. Also, we had a special education task force and subcommittee that included parents as well as teams of teachers and our special ed staff. The school nurses worked on a subcommittee to ensure that we were thinking through the health issues related to this. Our support services, student support services team worked very hard on a wellness and health and wellness plan that you'll see it towards the end of this presentation. And we, as you're aware, we had many various other ways that people could provide input, including various surveys, our town hall meetings, and then our faculty communication council, our parent communication council, and the classified employees communication council also provided a sounding board for us as we were developing the plan. Next slide, Pam. So our goal was to make all of the decisions through the lens of health and safety for both students and staff. We also wanted to enable parents' choice as much as possible and continue to provide the world-class education for every student that the community has come to expect from us. We also set as a priority to, as we develop plans to, in a measured way, bring back students in small groups, beginning with our most vulnerable students, and you can see that at the bottom of the slide. As we prepared for this study session, we believe that the recommendations we are bringing forward tonight could be implemented in line with the guidance from the Public Health Department. The numbers last week were trending in a positive direction, and the public health director indicated on Thursday that she was ready to issue guidance relating to school reopening. But that was last Thursday, the day before the agenda to this meeting was published. The new public health guidance relating to schools was not issued as discussed. And then on Sunday, the health department tightened the guidance relating to community activity because of the increasing community spread. They effectively paused their reopening plan at phase 2 in order to address the spread of the virus in the community. The following day, the governor added Alameda County to the state's monitoring list due to evidence of raising community spread. Tonight, we're asking the board to adopt the administration's recommended reopening plan with the understanding that we will start school in August with full remote learning. We will revisit the status of this decision monthly during our regular scheduled board meetings and implement our plan when the data suggests that it's safe to do so. Please note, as we go through this presentation tonight, the staggered nature of the plan that prioritizes the return of students in smaller groups, beginning with those who have the most specific needs. Page, please, Pam. There was a lot of talk in our earlier presentations about AB 77, the trailer bill related to the budget. That bill was converted into Senate Bill 98, which was later adopted into law. The law provides funding instructions for the implementation of the budget in the 2021 school year. It establishes a new planning document that's called the Learning Continuity Plan. It was initially called the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan, but that was another LCAP, so they took out the A word, even though the plan does require that we attend to our attendance issues. It defines distance learning and sets expectations as to when it can be deployed at a school or a district level. There's a couple of guidelines there for you to look at. And it creates minimum attendance requirements that are tied to state funding. So we have an obligation to take attendance. It also creates minimum expectations for staff and student interaction. And there are very real fiscal penalties if we fail to achieve those requirements. Remote learning in the 2021 school year will not replicate the remote learning that people experienced in the spring when a plan was rushed into implementation. I fully believe that our team of teachers did amazing work in that transition, given the extremely challenging circumstances. But we can and will do better. We must implement plans that adhere to SB 98 requirements and provide interactive and engaging learning experiences for all learners. We will provide ongoing professional development for staff and create support structures for students and for parents. Next slide. In our planning, we have been following specific guidelines from the Public Health Department that would enable us to know when and how it was possible to bring back students safely onto campus and staff. We needed to be able to demonstrate that each of these bullet points, which speak to specific areas of concern, we've got to be able to demonstrate that our team has planned and is able to implement strategies that tick off each of these measures. In many ways, this list represents the checklist, which will tell us when it's safe to move forward. Next slide. We also, as I mentioned earlier, when the plan was developed, we believed that the recommendations could be implemented based on the current guidelines from the Public Health Department. While that guidance continues to shift and we are planning to act on updated guidance, we wanted to share several documents with the community that we have utilized in the development of our plan. And so if you download that PowerPoint, those links should be live for you. With that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Mr. Ahmed Sheikhoslami.
Thank you, Superintendent Haglund. So we've been working closely with all the divisions and departments to ensure that we have utilizing the guidelines from both CDC, the state, and the Alameda County Public Health in preparing our schools for the proper cleaning and disinfecting procedures. And to that plan, we've developed a clear plan to have the proper supplies at hand for hand washing where it's possible, and in locations where we don't have access to hand washing sinks and soap, we'll have hand sanitizing stations throughout our schools for our students as they arrive, before and after going to the bathroom, and all the other recommendations in terms of hand sanitization stations will be readily available. In addition, we've developed, based on guidelines, disinfecting our schools and high touch points and restrooms throughout the day. We have purchased for all our school sites modern electrostatic machines that allow for quick disinfecting between cohort changes. And so the cohort stability is critical. And so what we will do whenever there is a cohort change between a group of students and another group, we will make sure that those classrooms are cleaned. In addition, if the cohorts are stable, we'll do additional disinfecting on a weekly basis and regular daily cleaning as well. So we've been also working on having plans to disinfect common areas and areas that are shared health offices, bathrooms, and such. We've also been looking into the classroom ventilation systems. The guidelines is to introduce maximum fresh air into those rooms. So we'll be looking at each unit and setting those so that they can bring outside fresh air. We have installed clean air filters throughout. However, we are revisiting this issue and will, where possible, upgrade our filters to best practice standards in the industry, which is right now the recommendation is MERV 13. And then when possible, we're also going to be looking at allowing doors and windows to be open where it's safe and allowable. So those are some of the steps that we're taking. On the background, we're also we'll be working with our schools in terms of egress to the schools, then drop off and pick up, and to avoid having students to congregate in areas that would be problematic. So there is a lot of work that will be occurring in the background, working with student services, working with the site administrators, and many other health protocols will be in place. And some of those details are now going to be discussed by our Assistant Superintendent in Student Services, Ed Dialazzo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheikh-al-Islami. So the next few slides, what we wanted to do was review the guidance from the Alameda County Public Health Department form, and also the Alameda County Office of Ed. That's what I wanted to say. So those two agencies developed some guidelines that we wanted to review with all of you tonight. So as Dr. Haglund mentioned earlier, all of our plans are really subject to our ability to meet the health and safety standards provided to us by County Public Health. So as you noticed, in the last few months, we've had to adjust. And so that's really the reality of where things stand at this point. So if the restrictions become more constricted from the County Public Health, then we will have to adjust our plans for that. And as they are relaxed, then we will adjust for that as well. So I just wanted to make that statement as I go through some of these areas that I wanted to discuss. So in particular, the areas of focus in the next couple of slides will focus on how are kids going to access the campus or visitors or parents and so forth. So we'll talk about that. Face coverings, personal care, physical distancing, cohorts, and other areas will be coming up here in the next couple of slides. So for this first slide, we are going to require a self-screening that happens prior to students coming onto campus, students and staff, I should say. So that would include the temperature check and some basic questions about student or staff's health, again, prior to coming to school. One of the things we want to think about is if a student is unable to do that, or if parent guardians need assistance with that home screening, then we may have to develop some sort of visual or temperature check screening here prior to kids walking onto our campus. I mentioned the limitations of non-essential visitors or volunteers on our campus, so we really have to pay attention to that and see who are coming on our campuses. The other thing too that we want to think about is the staggering of students' arrival and departure on our campuses. So we want to really think about what that campus should look like and what are the safety measures that we need to employ. In terms of face coverings and masks, right now the requirement is that all staff and all students, kindergarten and up, are to use cloth face coverings. So there are some exceptions. Students and staff who have health circumstances or other special circumstances, we want to make sure that we accommodate that. So that is one area that we may not require it, but we'll have to, like I said, figure out a way to accommodate those needs. Face shields are also permissible per the county guidelines, but face shields must have some sort of draping underneath that face shield, and then that needs to be tucked in. So again, the idea being that the possibility of spreading the virus is minimized. Next page, Pam. This page talks about some universal cautions around hygiene and hygiene practices. So we looked at several documents, California Department of Public Health, OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and then Alameda County Public Health documents. So the key points here on this slide is we want to make sure that we have those stations available for hand washing or hand sanitizing, as Mr. Shikol Islami mentioned. The providing instructions to or guidance and reinforcing our students and staff for hand washing is also going to be part of our plan to make sure that, so we have the washing stations and sanitizers, but we want to make sure that students understand the proper use, and then also reinforce that hand washing and general hygiene is super important. Where that happens, we are planning that right now, where we're going to put those stations. But again, the concept here on these particular slides is the general health and safety, hygiene, and personal care precautions. Next slide. Okay, a little bit about cohorts, or we've called them bubbles or groups. There is no guidance right now regarding the number of individuals in a cohort or the size of that cohort. So I think the main concept that County Public Health wants us to follow is that the groups are small and the groups are consistent or stable. That's really the main concept for us to follow. So if we're unable to maintain stable groups, then of course, then the face coverings and the physical distancing becomes even more important. There was a question about student or new students coming onto classrooms. So once those stable cohorts are established, then new students can come in, and again, going through the self-screening, then we'll have to place students into our classrooms as they move into to Pleasanton. Physical distancing, the number is still 6 feet. So as we put together our classrooms, student desks will be 6 feet apart, and then again, minimizing the face-to-face. However, if those cohorts are stable, again, small, consistent, the same kids, same individuals in the same groups, then the 6 feet recommendation can be relaxed. So we'll keep that in mind as we determine the stability of the cohorts that we establish. Teachers are allowed to move from cohort to cohort. So at the elementary level, we can have that. It'll be easier to have that completed where a teacher is in one cohort because they are teaching their grade level class. It changes a little bit, obviously, at the middle school and high school levels. But we wanted to say here, again, based on the County Public Health recommendations, that teachers are able to move from cohort to cohort, again, with the idea of, okay, stable cohorts, one teacher moves from period 1, period 2, period 3, that is allowable. Next slide. Okay, a little bit about transportation. The recommendation is that students, if they're able to walk to school, ride their bikes, or take personal vehicles. The idea being that public transportation, there's more people potentially on our buses, our public transportation buses. So, of course, physical distancing, again, face coverings will be essential in those situations. Students in special education who may receive transportation, we're going to make sure that we follow all the physical distancing requirements as well. In terms of supplies and technology, our request is that students bring their own supplies and maintain those supplies. So we will provide the essential materials for our students. I know we're one-to-one with Chromebooks, but the idea being that once students have their materials, that they keep those materials and not share the materials. So that's the main idea. And so if materials like PE equipment are to be shared, then we have to find a way to clean that equipment. Immunization has not been relaxed, so immunization requirements are still remain intact, and there is a link there for Shots for School if parents have questions about what the immunization requirements are. Next page. Okay, this is the plan that we are working on with our school nurses, and this is the management of health concerns on the campus. So essentially what we want to do is minimize students moving from one cohort to another cohort, and that could mean from classroom to the main office. So the idea being that minor first aid situations are really handled outside of the main office, hopefully in the main classroom, again, minor. For students, because of age or ability, if they're unable to do that, then we will obviously have to assist them. But the idea is, again, keeping the cohorts as stable as possible. If a student is presenting ill and needs to go to outside of the classroom, the idea then is that we need to determine a designated and isolated space for that student to go and then get assessed, and then potentially wait for a parent or guardian to pick them up. So we're planning this now about designated locations, designated areas, and how we're going to manage students who are presenting ill. Staff who are presenting ill, we're going to ask that they go home. There are some guidelines for returning to school, and so essentially what those guidelines are is we work with the County Public Health Department. For anybody who's tested positive, we work with them and get guidance from them to determine how people return back to our campuses. That last bullet is our general guidelines for students presenting illness. Next slide. Okay, this particular slide really just talks about our communication plans. It's super important, as all of you know, that during this time that we communicate as best as we can, review data as it comes in, update our protocols as they come in, and then communicate to our stakeholders in a timely manner. The CDE does recommend that we differentiate or provide additional guidance and communication to some of our medically fragile groups and vulnerable groups. And so for this particular bullet, I think about our unsheltered youth, our unsheltered families, our foster youth, and our students who have known health issues. So we want to make sure that we communicate with those families as best as we can. And then the last set of bullets is there is a process or a protocol, I should say, for if a PUSD community member, so a student or a staff member tests positive for COVID-19, then we contact Alameda County Public Health immediately, or Alameda County Public Health contacts us. And I'm actually the designated staff member, the liaison to Alameda County Public Health, and I have a direct line to the county liaison to schools. And we follow their guidance, we provide them information, and what happens on their end is it triggers an investigation process. And so they get information from us, and then they provide the guidance throughout the whole matter. Okay, I think that ends my slides. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Woodward.
Dr. Haglund.
Oh, is it back to Dr. Haglund? I'm sorry.
Just briefly.
Okay, Dr. Haglund, sir.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Dialazo and Mr. Sheikh Salami for their collaborative planning that they've been doing as they've worked through the health and safety issues. They are at paramount importance to each of us to make sure that our staff and our students are all safe when it's time to come back to school. So while we intend to begin the 2021 school year in full remote learning in all of these models, the following describe what will be used as we are able to bring students back on campus. So on the left-hand side in the green is the hybrid model, and that incorporates everything from full-time remote learning to full-time in-class instruction as represented by this sideways facing arrow. It's an adaptive strategy where stricter health guidance would engage remote learning, and in-class learning would be permitted as the health guidance is relaxed. Whereas in the hybrid model, a student might start with full remote learning and return to in-class instruction over the course of the year. The Flex model, the Flex Academy, and the elementary Learn at Home programs are for students whose families are considering a need for a longer commitment to at-home learning. The Flex Academy at the secondary level is a virtual school program where the vast majority of the learning will be done online through directed independent practice and Zoom sessions with appropriately credentialed Pleasanton Unified School District teachers. At the elementary level, this program will provide a full-day learning program with routine online engagement and Zoom check-ins, and this program is also taught by fully credentialed Pleasanton Unified School District teachers. With the long-term distance learning option, we're expanding a current practice. This currently exists in the district. It's a program that supports parents who would prefer to homeschool their children or have those levels of support and are not looking for as much structure as they would be in the other models. Keep in mind that these models may look different between grade levels in order to meet the needs of our students and our ability to implement based on upon the current health department guidance. With that brief introduction, I want to turn the presentation over now to Dr. Woodward, our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Dr. Woodward.
Thank you, Dr. Haglund, and good evening to all President Maher, members of the Board of Trustees, Cabinet, and our valued Pleasanton community. As Dr. Haglund mentioned, we do have 3 robust options that we'd like to provide our families and our students with, and all of these have been carefully crafted and thought out in order to provide our families with choice. As well, we assure the community that the health and safety of all students, staff, and the community of our highest priority. We want to offer world-class education, and so that would be in any model, excellent instruction, whether students are in class or at home. And so on that note, next slide, please, Dr. Van de Kamp, thank you. I'd like to just give you a 30,000-foot view of some of the data that we have already collected over time. So when this survey was administered, it was pre-registration and intent data, and it was intended to help us see what our families were asking for their students and for options. Now we realize that based on the current trends with COVID, this data will adapt. And so when COVID is spiking high, we probably would have more families that would want to consider a completely stay-at-home model. And when the trend is that it's improving, we may have more interest in coming back to school. But at the time of this data collection, and we had a very positive response, 12,130 families completed this intent form. It showed us that almost 85% of our families wanting a hybrid option in which it would range from remote learning all the way up to full-time return to in-class, physical in-class instruction. At the same time, we had 13.4% of our families indicate that they were interested in more of a longer-term type of remote learning program, such as Flex for secondary or elementary at-home learning. We did also see an increase in the amount of families that wanted to participate in long-term independent study with 1.7% of our families showing an interest in that. So for the upcoming slides, our Director of Elementary Education, Shay Galetti, and our Director of Secondary Education, Marta Gruel, will review the various models and will then loop back to me for recommendations. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Mrs. Galetti.
Thank you. If we could go to the next slide. First off, I just want to say good evening to our community, our Board of Trustees, President Maher, and our cabinet members. It is my pleasure to be here this evening and present the great work that we've been doing in our task force and with the steering committee. For both secondary and elementary, we actually started by reviewing the literature and looking across the nation and at districts close by and around the country to see how they were tackling this problem. And that is how we came up with the different scenarios. So at the chart you're looking at, you can see remote learning is at the top. And it's a reminder that it's there because remote learning is part of the hybrid model. However, we want to bring students back, and we know students having in-person instruction is what's best for them. So we looked at 3 different models, the AM/PM option, the 212 option, and the 4141 option. In the AM/PM option, the 2 groups of students are separated into a morning session and an afternoon session, 4 days a week. In the 212 option, the 2 groups are separated by a Monday, Tuesday, and then a Thursday, Friday. In the 4-1 option, it's a weekly separation. So one group goes for 4 days, and then the second group goes the next week in the reverse. If you notice on all of these options, they have 1 day of independent learning with staff check-in for that day, which is also a collaboration PD and teacher prep day, and that would be on Wednesday. If we can go to the next slide, please. This slide is the strengths and challenges. After we developed the model, we really focused on what would be challenging within each of the models, what would help students learn best, and what was going to provide the health and the safety protocols that needed to be in place for us to be in person. I'm going to start with the 4-1 model because I'm just going to go briefly over that. This was not the preferred model, and that was based on there would be a week of no instruction for students. They, of course, would do remote instruction, but it was not in person. And we felt this was inconsistent and did not bridge the instruction that was in person to then the instruction that was remote. Now, if we go to the remote learning model, with some of the challenges that we've already know and face, that it's not in person and that it can be very difficult, especially for our emergent readers. Our readers at TK, K, and 1, these are critical periods of time in which they're learning to read, and we know based on research that if they do not get this critical stage, it can have lasting impacts on their academics. Also, technology and not speaking of devices necessarily, but now that we are all in a virtual world, we have been in a place where technology hasn't worked or the internet is down. And so those are obstacles. The next 2 models that we looked at is how can we bring students back, the AM/PM and the 212. Both have really good strengths and some challenges to tackle. With the AM/PM model, this is consistent daily instruction, AM and PM for each of the groups. ELD and intervention could be done in person. Social and emotional learning can be done in person. Monday holidays would not have an impact where one group received instruction and another group didn't. And it also offers more consistent days and times for childcare. However, the cleaning and sanitizing can be difficult in that there is only a small amount of time when you consider a whole day for cleaning versus a time between the AM and the PM. In addition, students within our special day classes could possibly have limited access to their general education peers. For the 212 model, this also allows in-person instruction twice daily, and it would be consistent for childcare. It also, when we looked at the schedule, we could build in daily Zoom check-ins with our remote learners. And one of the biggest benefits of this model is that it allowed for a day of cleaning in between each group. However, the instructional continuity beyond the 2 days was not as strong as in the AM/PM model. I'm now going to turn it back over to Dr. Woodworth to talk about our recommendation of when we can bring students back.
Thank you, Shay. I appreciate that detail that you shared. So tonight, we are recommending that the board adopt the recommendation of administration with the to move to an AM/PM model for our preschool students, our transitional kindergarten students, first grade students, and second grade students. And that school would begin remotely for all students. As stated, we will revisit bringing our young students who are learning to read back to school at subsequent board meetings, when we will also reflect upon the data that will inform us as to whether or not it is safe to do so. In addition, I just want to assure the community that when we do begin to bring students back, we will start with our small, stable cohorts, and that would allow us to have students in groups of 12 and ensure that we are able to attend to the cleaning needs and the sanitization needs of our campuses in order to keep everyone safe. Also, it should be noted that when we do bring students back, because we fully expect that we will do that, and we definitely want to support our early readers, that we would do it staggering, perhaps one grade level at a time, for example. So that is my recommendation. And again, what we like about this model is that it does provide instructional continuity. It also provides our students with daily check-in times with their teachers. Hopefully we can get to the point where that is in person, and we like that it allows us to have smaller cohorts. So I'm now going to pass it back to Shay Galetti, who is going to reiterate anything that perhaps I didn't add.
Thank you, Dr. Woodward. So what you're looking at is a suggested schedule for the AM and PM model. And you can see Group A has a morning session, Group B has an afternoon session. And what I want you to note is first the time, 150 minutes of that. We're trying to maximize the time the students are in-person instruction. And then over on remote instruction side, you can see kindergarten, and that would also include TK, and then first and second grade, 80 minutes. These minutes are based on the new guidance from SB 98 that Dr. Haglund talked about. There is 180 minutes that is for TK and K, instructional minutes per day, 230 minutes per day for first, second, and third, and 240 minutes actually for fourth all the way through 12th. And so those are our guidelines of how we created the minutes. You also notice that there is not a start and end time. And the reason that is because we want to work with our business services to really maximize that time during the middle of the day to be able to properly clean the classrooms in between the cohorts. For kindergarten, recess is included in their instructional minutes. So we would be able to do a staggered start and end time that in order for then first or second grade to also start at a different time so that one, we can minimize the people leaving and entering campus, and also again, the cleaning routine in the middle. During remote instruction, that would be a carryover from the in-person instruction. I called it earlier the bridging. So our PE, science, music specialists would be teaching throughout the week during the students' remote time. For those students who receive counseling, they would also receive that during the remote time, and that would be true for intervention as well. That would also take place in class, but also remote. There would be independent reading and writing assignments, also district provided online language and math programs, ongoing classroom projects, and RSP and speech-related services as directed by a student's IEP. For the lunchtime, and another strength of this model is that we would be able to offer lunch to all students, where when we have some students on full remote learning, it has to be a pickup lunch where they're not physically on campus. So Group A could have lunch first and have a grab and go home. Group B, we could ensure that they could come eat lunch on campus in designated areas so that we can maintain the social cohorts and also the cleaning routine. And that would also be the teacher's lunch and classroom cleaning. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. As Dr. Woodworth mentioned and Dr. Haglund, remote learning is what we are starting with, and we are also recommending elementary remote learning for 3 to 5. What you're looking at is a suggested schedule of minutes. Again, I'll mention the times, 230 minutes, which is required for 3rd grade, and 240 minutes, which is required for 4th and 5th. Now, when you look over to the column where it says schedule, these would be the daily activities, and I'm going to take a minute just to explain that. The daily Zoom class meetings, these are extremely important because it's where the teacher is going to build community and help the class to gel and work together. And when we cannot start in person, it's going to be really important for the social emotional well-being of our students and our teachers that they can all connect together as a class. Direct instruction is new teaching. That is teaching of the concepts. And we are going to be focusing on our essential standards, our reading, our writing, our math, and preparing them to make sure that they are ready for the next grade level. Independent work time is going to be a bridge from that direct instruction. It could include intervention, enrichment, could include counseling. It is going to be based on each student's unique needs. And then throughout the week, music, science, and PE will be offered so that we can continue our comprehensive academic program. English language development will also be provided daily via Zoom. It is extremely important when providing English language development that it is live because students are learning English and they need the interaction of talking with their peers and that being led by their teacher. We can go ahead and move to the next one. So for next steps, and this is of course pending future conditions, what we have spoken about what we would like to do with our TK2 if we are able to go back when it's safe. For our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, when it is time to bring them back on campus, we haven't decided yet between the AM and PM option or the 212. And the reason for this is because we need to look at the cleaning protocols. It takes a significantly longer time to clean when you have more bodies and more people on campus. And so depending how the guidance goes and what we need to do to clean, we may have to do a 212 option so that we have more time to clean the rooms with that amount of student body. However, we also know that having the same model is also easier for families and for teachers and schools and school administration as well. So all of those factors will be weighed in. We can go ahead and go to the next one. This is elementary at-home remote learning. And if you notice, it looks just like the slide 2 slides ago when I talked about the remote learning. And it does mirror it, but this is for the families who do not plan to come back in the hybrid model. For health reasons or for other reasons, they are making the long-term commitment to do at-home learning for the school year. However, their instructional day will match what we are doing in our remote learning with the daily Zoom class meetings, direct instruction, independent work, the specialists for grades 1st through 5th, our IEP services and our English language development services. Now, you also notice I have added TK and kindergarten to this chart because in the hybrid model, we would like to bring those groups back first. In this model, they would remain at home remote learning. And it's important to mention that, and I know we have, for example, our dual immersion program at Valley View. This is a model that is available for them too. Our job is to make sure that we are working with all of our families and the various programs to meet their educational needs. We can go to the next slide. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to our secondary director, Namarta Graywall. And thank you for letting me share this evening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Galletti. Good evening, everyone. Displayed on this slide is the structure of the 3 hybrid models that were considered by both middle and high school secondary task force teams. Similar to the elementary models, we begin with remote learning, which involves 4 days of remote instruction for all students and 1 day of independent learning with remote check-ins, along with specific in-person and remote support for high-needs student groups, including students with disabilities, English learners, and students needing mental health support, and that day also includes time for staff collaboration. In the 2-1-2 option, to meet physical distancing guidelines, the student body is divided into 2 attendance groups that each receive 2 days of weekly in-person instruction. And like the remote option, 1 day is reserved for staff collaboration and independent learning activities with remote check-ins and support for high-need student groups. Cleaning and disinfection would occur between groups. Finally, the 4-1-4-1 option also involves 2 student groups and a similar structure for the independent learning day, but each group attends 4 days per week on alternating weeks. As Dr. Woodward stated earlier, upon careful review of health and safety requirements in SB 98 and physical distancing guidelines, at this time we do not feel it is feasible for PUSD as a system to uphold the standards for adequate cleaning and disinfection needed to uphold or to hold in-person instruction for all secondary students at the start of school. Next slide, please. Listed here are the strengths and challenges identified by our task force for each model. I would like to address some of the key strengths and challenges of each option. In the remote learning plan, there is daily Zoom contact with all students. This plan maximizes weekly instructional minutes via Zoom with 4 days of structured teacher and student contact. There's weekly support for high-need student groups, and this model limits exposure and ensures health and safety of students and staff. The challenges of this model are the lack of in-person social contact, which for secondary students as well as younger students is so critical. Going to the 2-1-2 option, the strengths are, the primary strengths, the twice weekly in-person instruction that this model allows for, daily Zoom check-ins with the remote learners. This model flows into the stretch and slide model of returning back to school in person, and there is weekly support for high needs groups. The challenges are many. There is exposure for students and staff to 3 to 4 student groups per day, as secondary students have multiple classes, even when we're meeting on a block schedule. Cleaning and sanitizing between groups of students is a challenge. It's difficult to ensure physical distancing during passing periods. There's lack of space for isolating ill students, and it's difficult to ensure prompt disinfection of restrooms. Finally, the 4-1-4-1 option combines most of the challenges of the 2-1-2 model with a lack of instructional continuity for remote learners, particularly high-need students, since each group of students is only attending in person on alternating weeks. This model does facilitate cleaning and limits exposure between groups. However, like elementary, this is not the preferred model. To reiterate, we are not recommending an in-person model at this time, as we do not have confidence that we can implement the group sizes and physical distancing needed, along with meeting sanitization guidelines that are currently called for by the Public Health Department. As the guidelines change and additional sanitization tools are developed, we would be able to plan for a thoughtful and careful move to an in-person learning model going forward. Next slide. And I would like to defer to Dr. Woodward to make the recommendation.
Thank you, Marta. And so it is our recommendation, the recommendation of administration, that the model we adopt for hybrid at this is the secondary remote learning option, and that would occur in a block schedule. The final details will continue to be worked on as we head into the opening of school. And I just want to reiterate that this will include daily check-ins with students and a more highly structured schedule than the one that we had in the spring. So on that note, I'm going to pass back to Marta to finish us up.
Thank you. So this slide outlines the structure of the remote learning schedule for grades 6 through 12. This model meets the 240 minimal daily instructional minutes required per SB 98. These minutes can come from a combination of live Zoom instruction and the time value of remote assignments completed daily by students. Included in those minutes is an expected minimum of 15 to 25 minutes of Zoom instruction by teachers per class meeting per day. For simplicity of this presentation, middle and high school have been combined here, but specific bell schedules for 6th through 8th and 9th through 12th are being developed in collaboration with our task force members. Both middle and high school will utilize a block schedule with structured instruction held before lunchtime, indicated by the gray horizontal bar on this slide. High school classes would meet on an odd-even block pattern to accommodate student participation in ROP classes, which are usually held during the first or last part of the school day. Wednesday is reserved for staff collaboration, intervention, and student support, and also includes the advisory classes, more commonly known as Access and Flex. The time after lunch is dedicated for independent work, time for students to meet with teachers in office hours, review sessions for reteaching or reviewing content, and one-to-one support or check-ins with students as needed. Since last spring, the increased implementation of technology tools for secondary will help to facilitate remote learning for students and staff. These tools include the clever single sign-on portal to simplify student access to online learning applications. PUSD has also adopted the Edgenuity Learning Management System to be used in the Flex Academy. This tool will also be available as a resource for all teachers in the hybrid model. Next slide. Next slide. Pending conditions in which we are able to bring students back to campus safely and sustain cleaning protocols, we will work with school site teams to develop plans for their return using the 2-1-2 model. We expect to start gradually by bringing back small groups and then scale up to ensure the safety and a successful return for all students and staff. We would not want to open too broadly or quickly and then have to scale back. The detailed structure of the bell schedules for middle and high school are contingent on time needed by custodial staff to adequately clean and disinfect classrooms between class periods. To facilitate a smooth transition as we bring students back to campus when deemed safe, the meeting pattern of this schedule is nearly identical to the remote learning model. That would be the least disruptive for students and staff as we return to school. And with that, I will pass back to Dr. Woodward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you please turn to the next slide, Pam? Thank you. Throughout this entire process, we have engaged our special education teachers in having a voice so that they can help us plan a program that is not only good for general education students, but is excellent for our students with special needs. And so we are very thankful for that. And we want to ensure that we prioritize the return of students to school in a manner that would support their needs and would also ensure their safety. So our recommendation, and you will learn more about this later in today's presentation, is that as soon as it is possible to safely bring students back to campus, that we are able to bring our preschool students back in small groups on a 2-1-2 alternating schedule. For our students in moderate severe program, we would like to bring our TK3 students back by having them physically come to school on an AM/PM schedule, and that would also allow for them to have the mainstreaming with their general education peers. For students in 4th through 12th grade, they would physically come to school in small groups on a 2-1-2 alternating schedules. And Wednesdays would be independent learning days set aside for teacher professional development with check-ins for students at all grade levels. However, at this time, we are recommending that all of our students, including our students with special needs, do begin the year in a remote learning environment in order to ensure the health and safety of all. So with that, I'm going to now pass it to Director Rivera, who's going to lead us into talking about Village High School.
Dr. Woodward, we couldn't hear that.
Thank you.
Dr. Woodward, we didn't hear that.
So Village High School is a little bit smaller than our comprehensives. So we're able to follow the block schedule like our comprehensive high schools, but we would be able to, depending on final enrollment, bring our students back every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. But essentially, it is the same. With our smaller enrollment, we're able to maintain a small, stable cohort. So that's why the recommendation doesn't have the group A and group B for when we bring our students back. That could change depending on enrollment numbers, but we want to maximize time with our students if we can do so safely. Additionally, our minimum minutes per day are slightly less, so you'll see that our schedule reflects that. And you'll also see that our schedule reflects 7 periods and not 6. And we do have our sting time, which is our advisory period at Village High School. So with that, I would like to pass it back to Dr. Woodward for a recommendation.
Thank you, Director Pereira. So at this time, our recommendation, the recommendation of administration, is that we begin the year with our Village High School students on a remote learning schedule, and then as soon as it is safe to do so, we allow them to come back and we welcome them back onto our campuses in a hybrid and remote learning schedule according to safety standards at the time. So I'd like to pass it back over to Director Pereira, who's going to talk with us more about our Flex Academy.
So our Flex Academy is currently being built. Our Flex Academy is an opportunity for students to opt into a remote learning model for a longer period of time. So initially this year, this is designed for primarily students who are able to commit for a semester, but ideally for a year. In-person attendance will not be required. So again, ideal for families who are concerned about the possibility of having to return before their family is ready for their students to return. We will institute a daily check-in. Again, exact timing is not indicated yet. We're still examining SB 98 to determine the exact configuration for the timings, but we will meet with our students Monday through Friday for at least a portion of the day. We will, like the like the comprehensive high schools, be utilizing Edgenuity, which is our learning management system and content provider. However, that will be utilized in a way that is supplementary to our district approved curriculum. So for our courses that are PUSD district approved courses, we will be utilizing the curriculum from PUSD. Our teachers will be using Edgenuity as a supplement to help reach our students in a distance learning model. That's really important for us in Flex because we won't be planning for students to return in large quantities, even if conditions improve and our comprehensive high schools do begin to improve. That said, we will have limited opportunities for students to come on campus and receive additional help when conditions allow, as long as their families are fine with that. So, thank you.
Sorry, I'd like to pass it back to Dr. Woodward.
Thank you so much. At this point in time, it's very important that we discuss how we plan to support our students with special needs. So I would like to introduce our Senior Director of Special Education, Mary Jude Dorpinghouse, who's going to walk us through the next several slides. Mary Jude.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share some more specific information. I do want to highlight that we did have the town hall last night where we went into much deeper detail, but for the benefit of the board and the community, we're going to go through this information again in a more summative nature this evening. So we really focused on gathering through the lens of various perspectives on special education. We solicited certificated feedback, classified staff feedback, administrative leaders feedback, parent and community input, as well as Mr. Dialazzo mentioned before, specific information regarding health for our decision making. I'm very proud of how we structured our return to school planning and the collaboration that happened. The special education lens was embedded into the large task force from the very beginning. And not only did we participate in the broader planning, but also there were amazing specialists and teachers from special education and paraeducators who were part of subcommittee planning, diving deeper into the specific needs of special education. And so we were able to be a part of the looking through the lens of how we meet preschool, elementary, middle, and high, and a part of those processes and those models that were shared earlier this evening, but also then for us to dive deeper into the specific needs of our very expansive and diverse group of students with disabilities. As part of that process, we did conduct a parent input and feedback survey, which closed on July 1st. And that feedback was really useful in us thinking through and getting the parent perspective and the guardian perspective of how things went for their student at home. We're going to dive a little deeper into that this evening. And if you could go to the next slide on that, Pam. Go back to the previous slide and click on the link of survey, please. Thank you. So this is our survey that we went through, and 254 parents participated in it. If you could go to the next slide, please. You'll see on this slide that we had representation all the way from preschool through high school. Next slide, please. You can see the responses represented all various programs, not just our resource programs, but our mild mod, counseling enriched, transition, preschool, county programs, and students who are in a county program or in a non-public school. So we really tried to offer that out to our families who are in a variety of settings. Next slide, please. On this slide, the question was asked, what worked well for you during remote learning? And there were 4 themes that came through. The themes were technology, home learning, related services, and then teachers, staff, interactions, and communications. There was a 5th theme as well, and I'll talk a little bit about the takeaways. So general takeaways, positive feedback that we received is that the various platforms that were used by not only the teachers, but our specialists worked well. The flexibility and pacing of remote learning worked well, and there was great support from the providers, from the parents' perspective, and the vast majority of the participants who commented in this section were really appreciative of the regular sessions being held, and then also the one-to-one attention that our teachers and specialists provided. I mentioned a 5th theme on here, and that 5th theme was a relevant theme that we noted, which was many parents reported that it was very challenging or really nothing worked super well for their students. And so we wanted to be transparent and to share that as well. We did solicit additional feedback, so we are working to make those improvements the next time as we launch into remote learning in the fall. Next slide, please. This question asked about them rating their experience in communicating with their child's teacher and IEP case manager. Very proud of our staff. 78% of the responders said that the responded as a 4 or 5. And if you include also the 3, it was very strong response that our teachers did a really great job, and our specialists did a really great job of communicating with the families. And that's certainly something that we'll want to continue in the coming year. Next slide, Pam. This slide talked about rating your experience with communicating with the service provider specifically, and there was a little bit more variability here, where 68% of the parents rated 4 or 5 in working with their specialist on their cases. Next slide. This question was, what would you like to see going forward? Again, if we're thinking about it, we were looking for whether we're looking at a full remote model return or a hybrid, but we got a wide variety of responses in this category. And again, we found some similar themes. The themes on here were on-site learning, enhanced distance learning, IEP implementation, and communication came up again. When we look at the general takeaways from here, there was quite a few comments about remote learning being very challenging, and the need for us to increase the structure and the organization as well as the rigor and how things are organized and shared with students and parents. Also, a key takeaway was that parents really desired full implementation of their students' IEP, and also they would love increased access to the teachers and the specialists to help support them in supporting their students at home. Next slide, Pam. This one was about if you had an IEP meeting during the shutdown to kind of rate how it went. So as we all know, we were launched into this with not very much warning. So having an IEP, which was already scheduled on the books, we jumped into doing it remotely. And we'll be honest that there were certainly some growing pains with this at the very beginning as we learned new ways to navigate through, get signatures online, things of that nature. But in the end, when you look at it, there was a strong response that either scoring a 3 or 4 or 5 as it working fairly well. And I think that this is a viable solution or option in the future, whether we're on in person or whether we're remote. It does give parents the opportunity and perhaps the flexibility from work or wherever to participate in the community. So I think that this is certainly viable. This is certainly viable. Next slide, please. This question was about if school reopened through either an in-class or a hybrid model or remote plus in-class, would you return your child to school? And at that time, prior to July 1st, only 12% of the families responded that they would not return their child to school. As we look forward to additional information down the road from our parents as they make a final commitment, we'll be able to better judge what that's going to look like for our return for school. Next slide. We did ask a follow-up question about training, and you can see it was fairly split into thirds here with only 28% saying yes, they definitely would want training, the remaining being split between a maybe and a no. So we asked, if you wanted training, what kind of training topics would you like? Those are featured on the next slide. And on this one, again, we had four topics that really stood out. The first one was academics, and when we look deeper into that, most people were looking for strategies in working with their child, engaging their child, and how specific strategies to support their child's English language arts or math. In technology, there was interest in learning more about the platforms that the staff were using so that they could be better equipped to navigate through those. There was also a theme around executive functioning, organization, how to motivate their child. And then there was an other theme, and really what the other was kind of a mix of examples, but really one that stood out to us is that parents aren't teachers, and they really need the teacher's expertise to help their children learn and grow. Next slide. This one is just a sampling, kind of representing the types of comments that we received, highlighting the need for more communication, ways to engage and motivate their children, worried about slippage or regression, and about children's social and emotional well-being, their desire again for teacher expertise, wanting consistency in the platforms that we use district-wide, and then just again that piece at the end about the real challenges of serving their child at home with special needs and how things were really difficult for them and the parent strain that ensued because of that. So next slide, please. So the results of this were shared with our committee, and they're being shared tonight. They were shared last night. And again, our goal is to be transparent about the findings, to be able to show the things that we learned that worked well, but also the things that are areas of growth that we can continue to work on and prepare for our return. The findings that we found from our parents, we truly valued each of you who did give us that feedback. We read every single comment, and we really tried to categorize and dig deeply through to find those trends and patterns. And so we thank you for that information. We are using that as part of the information gathering that we have been doing in order to improve what we have been doing and what we're going to do in the future. Pam, if you could go back to the original slide deck. Next slide, please. On this one here, you will see that I just want to kind of make some general statements in terms of how we're supporting students with IEPs within the 3 models. As mentioned earlier, we really have been trying to gather feedback and information from all different resources, and our staff have really worked hard to find a way to create programs that work within the various models that have been identified by the district. And while doing that, realizing that we have a very diverse population of students with disabilities and a huge range of needs. So as we look at those models, then we have to think through the various programs to figure out how are we going to differentiate these through the various programs, and how do we support students who are in our mild moderate or our moderate severe or our counseling enriched classes or in a resource program, or who are getting speech and language therapy or all of those other related services. So there's been a lot of deep conversation, and there will continue to be further conversation. It also was important for us to really look at how we're serving our students with disabilities and how we're able to prioritize their ability to be in the least restrictive environment and in the general education setting as much as possible in alignment with their IEP. The last bullet that I just want to say is that, as we look at the slide deck and the recommendations that were placed on that Dr. Woodward shared earlier, this is an iterative process. And the recommendations here about our moderate severe students returning when we are able to do so safely is a point of where we want to start. We do want to consider bringing back our other students when it's feasible, when it's safe. And we continue to gather more information. So even on here, as you look at this, you'll see that that changes have been made since this was originally posted, and that's based on additional feedback that we got, that we've received. So yesterday we had a large meeting with special ed staff. There were a couple hundred people participating, and we received additional feedback from that process. And then last night we had a town hall with 400 plus people. We've received additional feedback. So we continue to adjust based on the needs and the information that we have. And doing so, we're aligning to the information that we received from the county public health department. So it is something that we are trying to be responsive to and engage with all of our stakeholders so that we can make the best decisions that we can. The last thing I just want to highlight is that as we're looking at instructional minutes, and Ms. Galetti mentioned, the different different structures that are in place, and Ms. Gruel did as well. When we look at serving our students with special needs, and they are in one of our special day classes and they are receiving their minutes, those minutes will align to the same number of minutes that our general education staff. We're committed to ensuring that they have access to the same number of minutes as their general education peers. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now, and I think it goes to, I don't remember, I'm sorry. Dr. Woodward?
Yes, thank you, Mary Jude. I appreciate that detailed information that you just shared. I would like to point out that although some of these slides were not on the uploaded slide deck, you can find the link on slide number 30, and that was for some of the slides that Mary Jude just did. So at this point in time, I'd like to pass to Mrs. Reeve, who's going to talk with us a little bit more about how we're going to support our students with social emotional learning.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Woodward. I know we're getting towards the end of our presentation here, and we just really did want to take a few minutes to talk about social emotional learning and our mental health supports for students. So Patrick, if you could go ahead and thank you very much. So when we're talking about social emotional learning, we want to make sure that everyone understands the definition as this being really the process through which children and adults understand and manage their emotions, how they set and achieve positive goals, how they feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and also make responsible decisions. And we know that our social emotional learning competencies, as well as our school connectedness for students and staff, is really critical for their engagement. We know that students perform better in schools when they're positively connected to the adults on campus and with their academics. So we really strive to create safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments in our district, and that support and promote all students' social and emotional development. We wanted to highlight that we do have a couple of different curriculums that we use in the district. For our youngest learners at the Harvest Park Preschool and through our traditional kindergarten or TK programs, we use the Komochis program. For elementary K through 5, we have a second step social emotional learning curriculum. And just recently, we did purchase and adopt this Character Strong curriculum, and we also use EverFi as well. And so with those curriculums, it really is curriculum that's focused on the whole child, and it's vertically aligned lessons that teach social emotional competencies and character development. Some of the lessons covered are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So as we look at reopening potentially in a remote setting, we want to make sure that we integrate SEL and equity components throughout our curriculum. So we're working with our teaching and learning team to talk about how we can best do this. As we look at this, we want to make sure that we offer professional development to our teachers. We also want to make sure that whether we're in person or learning remotely, that we're building community for students, and that we can also utilize the PBIS teams and our positive behavior intervention supports framework to make in-person or more remote learning safe, predictable, and positive. On the next slide.
Wait, before you go on, Kathleen.
Sure.
Step back to the outside. I just want to make a point. You may have noticed that we've changed some of our language as we've worked through this process. And one of the changes that we made was we stopped using the phrase social distancing and started using the phrase physical distancing.
Yes.
That's because it's important that our students still have an ability, and we facilitate ways for them to make social connections, just not physically next to each other. The isolation that the spring experience created for some students was beyond acceptable. And we just know that we've got to be intentional about building those options for kids so that they're not becoming socially distanced. They may be physically distanced, but we're trying to build those social connections. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to add that, Kathleen.
No, I really appreciate that. And, at the beginning of every school year, as teachers work to establish those relationships in their classroom, it is going to be different in a remote setting than it would be in person. And so we know how important that is, and everything kind of builds on that foundation that's created at the beginning of the year with those positive relationships. So Patrick, on the next slide, we also did want to highlight some of the work that our team has done. We have a new wellness website that our SAP coordinator has put together. We want to thank PPIE again for funding this position for us. Monica Wharton is our staff member who came on this year to really help kind of coordinate some of our wellness efforts. And so that website is a live link there. You can link to that and see some of the pieces that she's pulled together from our school counseling websites across the district, where our school counselors this year, while we were in remote settings, put together some virtual social emotional supports and lessons that parents could access and support our elementary students with. And then there were also resources for our secondary, our middle and high school students as well. We also have links on there to student mental health and additional wellness. We have lots of different apps that are available for students to access. We have parent resources, staff resources, and we do have our virtual wellness centers as well. So those were in-person wellness centers at our high school, and they've gone virtual too. So all of that information is available on that website. And as we move into this new school year, we're looking at giving additional professional development around mental health and trauma-related supports and interventions. We have our school counseling referral program. We have 3 school social workers in the district. We did partner with Cara Solace at the spring of this year, and we're continuing working with them moving into this next school year. And they are an online mental health resource to help connect families to local providers. We also have 2 staff members who support our homeless youth and then our foster and kinship youth. So Miss Noemi Alvarez is our Spanish-speaking school social worker. And so if your living situation changes during COVID-19 and this economic crisis as well, we do have supports for any families experiencing homelessness. And also for our foster and kinship youth, Miss Brenda Montgomery is your contact. And both of those links there do go to our websites with our contact information and more resources for parents. So thank you so much for allowing us to present on that information as well. And I believe, Dr. Hagland, I'm turning it back to you.
Unmute.
I'm batting cleanup, so here we go. I'm going to bring forward just a review of the recommendations, and then we'll open it up. We'll talk a bit about next steps and open it up for questions from the board and then from the community. So this is a summary of the final recommendations, and it includes the slides where those recommendations can be found. So community members, if you print it out, you'll be able to find it. And board members, you can refer back to those slide numbers in your packet. So TK through 2, which is inclusive of preschool, by the way, we're recommending that after we come off of the remote start, that we go into an AM/PM schedule, because these are some of our younger and more vulnerable students that we want to make sure we have the ability to get back together with them as soon as practically possible. So that's our TK preschool TK through 2nd grade. The grades 3 through 5, again, they will do a remote start. And you can refer back to slide 19 to see what will come after the remote start. In grades 6 through 12, we will again start remotely and then start remotely, with a block schedule, as was described earlier. The SDC, or self-contained classrooms, in TK through 3rd, again, we'll go with that AM/PM model. In grades 4 through 12, the SDC classrooms, moderate severe, will go with a 2-on-2 model when they come back off of remote learning. Again, all of these models start with remote learning. And Village High School will do a hybrid remote blocks schedule, which you can find on slide 27. So that's just a quick review of what we're recommending and asking for the board to approve. Just understand, as you approve the plan, you're approving the plan starting on that remote schedule. And then as we are able to step into in-person instruction, this is the models that will be rolled out at the different grade levels. So next slide.
Dr. Haglund, can I make one clarification? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So preschool, actually, the recommendation is for the 2-1-2. We should have added that on the top here. So preschool is a little bit different than TK2.
Okay.
It would be the 2-1-2 model. So thank you.
And is that articulated on slide 18?
It was articulated on slide 26.
For preschool.
For preschool, correct.
So I stand corrected. Preschool will be a 2-1-2 model once we come off of the remote schedule.
Correct. Thank you.
So we will revisit the decision to sustain full remote learning monthly at our regularly scheduled board meetings and begin to implement our plans that you see represented here as it's safe to do so. As soon as we can meet the health guidelines and the safety requirements that we discussed earlier, bringing back first those who have the most specific needs. So next slide, please. Next steps, we are going to be sending out what's called a final commitment form to families, and that will ask them to make to pick that option, whether it's the hybrid option, the flex option, or the long-term independent study option. And we would like to have that information submitted before July 24th, earlier if possible, because that is what we will be using to drive our staffing decisions and programmatic decisions. So be on the lookout for that coming to you via email, all of our PUSD families. We will also be working with the task force to develop and the school sites to develop the specific bell schedules with HR for staffing issues and with business services for facility preparation. And then the teaching and learning and the student support services team are going to be collaborating together to ensure that we have the professional development modules in place so that teachers have access to those as soon as possible. In August 7th through the 11th, we do have our mandatory professional development day, but we will be providing additional professional development opportunities for teachers using the SDR model and any other way that we can provide opportunities. I know that the federal dollars that are coming in, the state dollars, do have some ability to attach to professional learning opportunities related to the remote learning. And so we want to make sure that our teachers and our classified staff members who work with students especially have access to the professional development that they need so that the remote learning experience that people, I'm going to say experiencing it because that's the word I was thinking. The remote learning experience that people have will be substantially different than what they might have experienced in the spring. So we will also work to provide the devices, distribute the devices in time for school to begin on August 11th. And so a couple of items on our agenda later tonight, action items that will help us move closer towards that objective. So that's all I got right now. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Maher, so that you can facilitate the Q&A.
Okay, I certainly will ask for questions and comments. I have a couple of comments and questions. First of all, wow, and thank you for all the information. Starting with my questions, is it possible as we move to remote learning at the beginning of school that we can set a timetable? By that is like the first quarter will be remote. So parents can, figure out their daycare when we start to move and can figure out who's watching whom. Students can figure that I know for the first quarter I'm going to be doing this before I move into this. I'm concerned that although we're checking, that if we say, hey, in 2 weeks we're going back, that maybe for students, parents, and teachers, that might be difficult. So I would like to see, I don't know how the other board members feel, but some type of time limit as we move forward, so that if everything starts getting progressively better, hopefully, with the pandemic that we're in, that, okay, we're in it for the first quarter, and then we'll monitor certainly to see if the second quarter we can start, but give some type of timetable. The next question along with that is, do we have a criteria for when we will open? In other words, cases are substantially below a certain amount. who's going to give us that criteria when it's okay to open?
So I'll take those both those questions if I can, Steve. So the simple answer for the first one is that while we would love to be able to give a specific date when we will bring everybody back or reconsider bringing everybody back, my concern is for the students who need more direct instruction earlier than that. And when we can safely provide it, I want to be able to do that. We have some very young students who are learning to read in TK through grades 2, and teaching reading remotely is a very difficult thing to do. And so while I agree that it might be easier and more practical to have that type of a target at the secondary level, for our students with special needs and for our younger students, they're really working on those foundational skills. I'm hesitant to put a deadline that is that far out in the future. The reality is we may not be opening because of the health guidelines anyways. Right. So I just want to keep my eye on those most vulnerable students and be able to respond as soon as we're able to respond.
Which sounds logical. Would you possibly be looking at maybe middle school or certainly high school would give them delineation of time? If everything continues on this progress, second quarter will open up, or do you want to keep the same type of opening that you would for the TK to 2?
To be honest with you, Steve, I think that the levels of complexity of trying to keep students in social bubbles at the secondary level is darn near impossible, no matter how you slice it. So until there is some very clear guidance as to what we can and can't do, I really foresee that we will be out on the longer term at the secondary level. That would include middle school and high school. So it'd be easier for me to say, yes, let's take another look at this at the date we would do progress reports, or at the quarter, or at the semester. And we'll have a similar mindset with the younger grades. I just want to be very sensitive to not setting arbitrary guidelines that might inhibit our ability to reach our youngest students.
Okay. The second question.
The other question that you had was related to what's the standard for returning. And there have been a couple of districts that have reached out and set an arbitrary number. We're going to rely on the guidance of the Public Health Department as opposed to setting an arbitrary number. And there is a conversation that's taking place right now amongst all of the superintendents in Alameda County about what that target might be. So what I'm not saying is that we won't have one. I'm just saying that right now I'm not willing to set it.
I see. Okay. And maybe this will be a question for Dr. Woodward, unless you want to take it, Dave. I don't care. Dr. Woodward, you mentioned teacher professional development. I was very pleased to hear that there's going to be more than just the one day, and that we can encourage our teachers and classified and everyone involved to really take advantage so that the program we offer is better than what we offered in the spring. Not that everyone didn't try, but that we were just kind of shoved into it. And moving forward, I'm very pleased that you're offering multiple avenues of staff development. And hopefully that'll be certainly before school starts and then ongoing.
Yes, absolutely, President Maher. Thank you for that. In fact, I'd like to share with you about the strands that we will be dividing our professional development into. We have identified 4 strands, and it may continue to grow. But first is effective remote instruction. We've learned some valuable lessons from the spring. We've already had reflective forums on those lessons learned, but we know moving forward that this will be a more structured, more robust remote learning program than what we had before. So effective remote instruction would be one strand. Another strand would be using assessment for learning. And with that, as you recall, we did adopt the MAP assessment. We also have other assessments. And we know that students will be receiving grades this time as we head into remote learning, at least based upon the guidance we've received thus far. So we have to be able to determine how to do our assessments online and in the remote realm. The third area is one that we've heard for years and has become increasingly important for all of us, and that is something we must ensure that we provide equity and inclusive practices as we move forward. And that will include looking at our social studies curriculum and making sure that we are using an unbiased lens in order to be able to provide our students with an accurate historical representation of the contributions of all groups. And finally, our social emotional wellness, that will be a strand. We know that being away from school has been devastating emotionally to our students and also to many of the adults. It has been hard to work in isolation. So those are the four overarching umbrellas. As well, we will continue to work with our classified union and our APT in order to identify other areas of professional development that would be useful to our staff. I'd like to also just say that today during our task force, we received some very, very meaningful input from our classified and our teachers who provided us with information about the type of professional development that they would also like to have. And so our integration specialists and our team, we are working already on developing these modules so that teachers can access them prior to beginning school, in addition to the August 7th day of professional development.
Also, Dr. Wood, I think I heard correctly that our students of needs, whether it be IEPs, 504s, language development, so forth, they're going to receive also face-to-face instruction and collaboration with their teacher. That is correct?
They'll begin initially with the remote daily Zooms, and then they are definitely a priority group. We realize that as we can safely bring students back on our campus, we want to be able to bring our students that will require additional support back to our campus.
Ask the question correctly. I mean, during Zoom, they're going to certainly have teacher contact and remote help, because I heard from a lot of parents that they had a lot of difficulties during the spring because of processing issues, attention issues, you name it. And so we're going to make sure they get the same type of contact through Zoom, of course, as our regular general ed students.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the last thing, I was very pleased to hear Kathleen Reeves talk about the emotional part of our students. And is Monica Wharton or is Kathleen going to be the one that coordinates all that? Ed, maybe you can answer that out.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely appreciated Ms. Reeve talking about it as well. It's a high priority for us in student support services to make sure that we build the content, we work with teaching and learning to make sure that we incorporate the SEL curriculum into the general curriculum. So yes, so Kathleen, Monica Wharton, potentially our social workers, Ashley Sprader, our coordinator of student services. So we will work hand in hand with teaching and learning to make sure that we provide those units or develop those units, provide the PD, and then incorporate it into the content delivery. So Kathleen, I don't know if you wanted to add more.
No, you did a great job. I was just going to say Ashley Sprader, Leslie Heller, our social work team, and our counseling team. So we'll pull a team together. So thank you.
And then my last question is about Ingenuity. That is going to be a supplement or an additional tool, not a program that our students will be using?
Thank you so much for that question, President Maher. I'm going to pass that to our Director of Educational Options, Heather Pereira.
Hi, so it actually depends on which model it's being utilized in. In our Flex Academy, we are introducing some Edgenuity specific courses to provide more options for our students to take electives. But again, in the Flex Academy. If teachers use Edgenuity in our hybrid model, they are using it as a supplement to the PUSD curriculum to help with enrichment, to help with intervention, and to help with program delivery. In the Flex Academy, the Edgenuity program will serve as the base, and we will additionally, or just like we do in the hybrid program, use the PUSD adopted curriculum with the same standards, the same learning outcomes. But this is a tool to help our teachers reach the students remotely, because especially in the Flex Academy, that is our model of operation. So we need this digital tool to be able to differentiate and provide students with support. To be clear, our teachers are the teachers that will be developing the program with the Edgenuity as the base and layering our district adopted curriculum.
And then my last question, if a high school student has a schedule that they made out last year, will that schedule be in place come remote? And so that particular teacher will be teaching that particular class that they thought they were getting, or will that be changed?
I think that this is, President Maher, is this specific to Flex or to, for example, the hybrid model?
That'd be remote as we start the year.
Okay, as we start the year remotely in the hybrid model.
Yes.
So part of what will happen is when we receive the data from our final commitment form, we'll be able to accurately determine the course requests for our secondary students, secondary meaning grades 6 through 12. And in that, we'll be able to determine if the schedules that the principals had already put together, the master schedules, need to be modified. So for example, if we have a large group of students for a particular class that would like to go to the Flex Academy, that would require some shifting, which would then require changing of teachers. In addition, we will be having our own teachers teach in the Flex Academy and have our own teachers from Pleasanton Unified, because we think our teachers are the best teachers. And so we'd like to have them teach our at-home learning at the elementary level as well as the Flex Academy. So that we expect that there will be some shifting that will need to occur.
Okay, as I turn it over to the other board members, thank you for all you've done, Dr. Woodward. It's just amazing, to tell you the truth. So thank you very much to you and your team. And other board members with questions? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, just to start, I really want to appreciate the staff for the thoughtfulness and time and inclusion and collaboration that has been done to come to this. I know that we're, only a few weeks away, and so people might have wanted to know the answers a lot sooner, but really taking our time to do it right. I mean, 1 week ago we would have maybe had a whole different, not totally different recommendation, but we would have certainly started differently. So thank you for that. We asked a whole bunch of questions before the meeting that were answered online, and normally we might want to reiterate those questions, but in the interest of time, I probably won't do that for at least the ones I asked, so other board members can do that. But a couple of kind of clarifications and questions. One is, we talked about grading. So in the spring, we went to a very modified grading thing. In the fall, we're basically going back to normal grading, right?
So as of what we know right now, we have not received any guidance, or we do not aware of any legislation that would indicate that we are in hold harmless anymore. So based upon right now, current guidance is that we will continue to go forward with our grading practices.
Okay, thanks. Then the next question is really, so we talked about trying to, in the communication side of things, trying to have an extra level of communication for students and staff who are medically fragile or whatever. How are we going to track who that is and who needs that extra communication? I can understand it for certain groups, but I mean, medically fragile and that type of thing. How is it going to be something that people want to opt into as a, let me sign up to get this extra communication, or how would that work?
So I could take that, Dr. Woodward. So Trustee Miller, we do have information now about our students who have medical needs. So those are already disclosed in some way. The other students I mentioned are unsheltered youth. So we do track students. It's under the McKinney-Vento Act. And so we have staff that tracks our students who qualify for that service. Our foster youth, our kinship youth, we have staff who track students who qualify for those services as well. So we have some information now that we have to answer your question about parents opting in. At least for McKinney-Vento and foster youth, there are very specific criteria that have to be met in order to qualify for those services. If parents come forward and present new information about health status that we may not currently have, then we would definitely take that information into consideration and determine who those students would be moving forward.
Yeah, thanks. I think we may need some sort of a database, because I think, you're going to have the student who has a, potentially immune compromised person at home or something, and that may be, somebody who needs extra communication. So maybe there needs to be some way to kind of proactively sign up for that type of thing.
Yes.
Extracurriculars, can you guys talk about how that might look starting the school year, given that we're going to be 100% remote?
So I'll try, and then Janelle, you can jump in there. So on July 20th, we'll get some kind of information from CIF as to what their intentions are. Given where we're at as a county and our decision to function remotely, it's going to be difficult for us to implement some of the programs that I know parents and students are looking forward to. It's an unfortunate consequence of the situation that we find ourselves in. It's completely unfair, especially to those seniors who are, going into their final year of competitive eligibility in high school. So that's the sports side of it. There has been some conversation about potentially moving sports seasons into the spring in hopes of riding out, whatever might happen. But yeah, and we'll do that if we're allowed to do that, obviously. But we just don't know. Talking to Dr. Pan in the call last Thursday with the other health officers as well, the conversation was about the potential of wrestling with this issue for the next 18 months. And so I certainly hope that's not the case. But when the health officers are looking that far out in advance, we need to be thinking about it as well. So we'll also think about how, because those extracurricular type programs are so critical to our efforts to ensure students feel engaged, we'll try to find ways to move some of those things online. And provide opportunities for clubs, as an example, to meet and students to engage in that way. But this is a strange situation we find ourselves in, and it's never happened before, at least not in the last 100 years. And we're having to figure it all out as we go. It's all bad, no matter how you.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Another question is really around sort of accountability. So we know that there are rules are in place where, a student is required to attend and teachers are required to teach. How will we track that? I mean, I assume we'll be taking attendance as normal or something, and that, but there's certain requirements on numbers of minutes and all of that. Is there any way we're going to be able to actually ensure that we're doing what we're supposed to do?
Well, just like every single other district in the state of California who now understands what SB 98 means in terms of their funding, they're all trying to figure out that attendance model. And it doesn't fit within any regular attendance accounting procedures that we are used to, because it's not about bubbling if a kid was there. It's about documenting the number of minutes that a student participated in their work. And so that's way different than we've done attendance in the past. And so Ed and his team are going to have to work double speed to come up with those procedures that people will be asked to follow. And as teachers develop units, as our specialists assist with developing of units, in the templates, we need to include the amount of time that's anticipated that a student might take on each activity in any lesson that we develop. It just is going to have to become a part of our practice, and we're not used to that. But it's a serious requirement. I know we didn't talk about this yet, but it will be included. The demonstration of those minutes in terms of weekly attendance for each student will be included as a part of our audit. So it's not a, you better do this type of a thing. If you can't demonstrate that you did it, you lose that ADA. And
but we also right now are I mean, in normal times, we still have to really track our attendance really carefully, right? It's tied to everything.
Well, generally speaking, yes, a teacher takes attendance each period or each day, and we turn it into the state, and the state looks at it. But now the state is requiring that minutes be tracked, not just attendance. So attendance is demonstrated by the amount of minutes a student engages with the curriculum or with the teacher. So that's different. And yes. we don't have a long runway to figure it out. And so that's one of our next big hurdles.
Yeah, in the old method, you assume that they're going to be in the class the whole 50 minutes or whatever for each thing, right? So my last question is sort of just, there were some questions about this over the weekend, and that is around sort of flex and hybrid and independent study relative to college and college requirements and so forth. And maybe there can be a small description on how that applies.
So sure, let me take a stab at that. So independent study currently doesn't offer all of the courses that a student might need or want for entrance into the UC system. They can get it at their comprehensive high school, and that's what they normally would do. Independent study tends to fill gaps, the model that we currently have. In a situation where a student is starting in grade 9 and going up through grade 12, they can meet the UC A through G requirements, but it might mean dual enrollment back at a comprehensive high school in some form, or taking a class at LPC, or I mean, there's a lot of ways to solve the A through G problem. And the colleges have been very gracious in their rulemaking recently because of the virus. Same thing with Flex. Flex will start with most of the classes that the comprehensive offer, but not all. And so that's why the rules will allow both for independent study and Flex for them to enroll back at the comprehensive high school for those classes that they can't get through that Flex model, or they can take it through Las Positas. So there's opportunities available to them to meet that criteria. And I would say that the Flex will start as you would expect, in an infancy, and it will continue to be developed over time. And so what courses aren't available in that program immediately will be developed by that program over time. So our intent is to maintain that Flex program as an option for students. And so we want to make sure that it has all of the things a student might need to prepare them for college entrance. So I don't know.
Those
Students can also take two classes from the high school or LPC at the same time as they're taking part in Flex. Right?
Absolutely.
Along those same lines, can you say something about AP and honors along the same lines that Mark is asking about?
So generally speaking, independent study programs in general do not offer AP courses. That doesn't mean they can't, they just don't typically do. So the Flex program will be offering AP courses where those courses are available, and we'll be working to develop courses where courses aren't currently available. So that's a program that will develop over time. But if a student wants to take an AP course that's not available in the program that they're in, we are facilitating the opportunity for them to enroll in those courses at the comprehensive schools, given that there's space available. They also have the opportunity to take an actual college class at Las Positas College. So there's options that families, the counselors and the director of that program will sit with families and help them work through all of the potential challenges that they might face. So I just encourage parents that are interested in either Flex or independent study to schedule a time with Director Pereira to sit down and talk about what those options are. and get their questions answered.
Okay, Mark, finished? Okay, Joan?
I have a couple of things as well. Thank you, Steve and Mark, for fleshing out some of the questions that lots of our families have been asking and that we've had as well. I wanted to start, as did my fellow trustees, with an appreciation. Summertime, for the public's benefit, is normally the time when school districts do all of the work that they can't get to during the school year when students are present. And this includes a lot of work done in the business office. This includes, a lot of curriculum planning and a lot, there's just a lot of things that happen over the summer in a normal situation. And then to combine this on top of it, to come up with such a robust and well thought out plan on top of all of the regular work, the normal work that has to happen. I've just been very, very impressed. And the level of engagement by our certificated task force members who are on their own time volunteering to work on these issues, as well as classified members. I mean, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your energy and thoughtfulness and compassion and, just that willingness to roll up your sleeves and try to come up with, making, lemonade out of the lemons that this pandemic has dealt us. So again, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you. My question first is for Dr. Haglund. Have we actually received any instruction or guidance from any of the health departments that we should not be opening school in the fall?
No.
So, being that we're not basing this decision on data or science, we're basing this decision on an abundance of caution?
So I don't know that I would go that far. The health department will never tell us to not do something. They're going to give us guidelines. So we receive guidelines that say things, well, if you can do it within this many feet and this many people that stand this far apart and have this much cleaning between each time they touch something, they give us guidance like that. But your question was specifically, have they told us to not open school? No, and they won't. That's not their job. Their job is to identify the criteria that makes opening schools safe. It's our job to determine whether or not we can do it safely. Does that make sense?
So that's really where the crux of my question is that I'm going. Yeah. So we're not setting a hard target for what's safe or what, level of, some people have asked us to set a hard number of, cases or,
criteria,
trend lines or things like that. And so what we're really saying is that with taking the guidance that's provided to us by the county health department in particular, and the CDE into consideration, that every school district is going to have to make these decisions locally, right, based on what we know we can accomplish and what the needs in our community are. Is that fair?
That's correct, unless and until the governor issues an executive order to direct schools to close, which is to dismiss schools, which is what he did in March. So we're not in that situation. We haven't been directed to keep schools closed. We are not under a shelter-in-place order. Those things have been lifted, relaxed, and they've been doing phased reentry. Part of that phased reentry plan, if you look at some of the public health department's guidance, is you have these phases, and schools were way out, in phase 4, and we're currently in phase 2. So what they were saying is that when we get to phase 4, all schools can open all at once for all of the kids. That's full reopening of schools, much like when they reopened beauty parlors or whatever. They said everybody in this area can open that. And that means everybody gets to go back, right? So By the time we've got to phase 4, when they do a full reopen of schools, there's a lot of space in between where, as long as we can meet the criteria that they've established in terms of physical distancing and cleaning procedures and blah, 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 as long as we can meet that criteria, there is no restriction from opening in a smaller way than that. So the hybrid models you've been hearing a lot of, about the 2-1-2, the 4-4-1, or the AB, where you're dividing kids up into different groups in order to meet that different criteria. All of those things will be possible in a measured way between now and when we hit phase 4, which is full reopening. And it will be our decision, my job to recommend, my team's job to help me get to that recommendation that we all believe we can stand behind, and then your decision to implement the recommendation. It is a local decision.
So, and the reason I wanted to be very clear about that is I wanted people to understand that districts across the state are making different decisions. And just because one district has decided to do something does not mean that we need to do the same thing or that we need to do something exactly the way they're doing it. So that's my main point. Yeah. I have to say that I am anxious, as I know many of our staff are as well, and the teachers in particular, to get our younger learners back in the classroom. For a variety of reasons. Mentioned earlier was the difficulty with just teaching some of the basic skills and getting them to be in a good reading place over Zoom. But also, in particular, there's socialization, there's just the social emotional skills that we want them to learn. And it's also very difficult for our families to go back to work when they are also home caring for children because school is remote 100%. So I was in favor of the recommendation that we had prior to some of the downturn in our as to health statistics and some of the changes that have happened over the last week. I really, we did the best we could in the spring with going to distance as quickly as we did and trying to get everybody into some learning mode that could work. But it was so reliant on parental teaching. And I know this came up in the survey results, it came up in the special ed results, especially, we cannot put the lesson instruction on the parents this time. And I feel confident that the work that has been done with the task force and Dr. Woodward's staff and her leadership, as well as your leadership, Dr. Haglund, I feel that we have come a long way for that, and we're not setting that expectation. We're putting in place things that are going to, as well as with the backing of the legislation in SB 98. So it's not going to be the same as it was in the spring. And so parents who really struggled with that and who would have been wanting us to be in person again because of some of those reasons, I hope tonight you heard that it's not going to be the same way that it was in the spring. So one thing I wanted to ask, a lot of these tech tools that we have, including Zoom, have the ability for like breakout sessions. So in the past, I don't know if we're using volunteers in centers the way we used to in elementary school when my kids were young. But is it possible that we could use parent volunteers in breakout sessions to do more of that one-on-one reading to help the teachers, just have those kids reading aloud to someone and, having that feedback, so that maybe we could make sure that those younger readers really are getting some of that more one-on-one attention that seems to make a difference. I don't know if that's something that's possible or has been talked about.
So I can take that one, Trustee Larson. Excellent question. It's something that we navigated as we looked at data privacy agreements and the privacy issues that do surround things like breakout rooms. We know that we already need to provide professional development, so to speak, or instruction for our students in the area of digital citizenship. When students, one of the things that we found is that when we would allow students to go to breakout groups and there wasn't direct teacher supervision, there were some times when perhaps the discussion was not necessarily completely academic. And so we need to be very, very careful that when we do, that we have adequate supervision, and ideally that supervision is occurring with somebody who is employed by our school district. And so having said that, there may be some things that we find that we can do that include the use of parent volunteers, because we know how very essential that they are. And in terms of an in-class model, our parent volunteers make all the difference in the world. So I think we're very open to finding strategies and ways that they can help, but we have to make sure that everything that we do in the digital realm is carefully vetted in order to protect the privacy of our students.
Yeah, I thought about that as well, and I wasn't sure how that would be able to work, but I just wanted to raise it as to see if it was something that I'm looking for, as I know you are, any way to help our younger readers and get some of that attention that we know they need.
So if we could get everybody to pick up a book and read to a child, to go out on walks together, to exercise together, to have conversations around the dinner table, that's language development skills. And the activity, the physical activity, helps the brain be prepared for learning. So sit a child on your lap as long as you're within the social bubble, read a book, build those relationships with them. Even with the older kids, find time to sit down together and read a book and talk about it. Maybe pick a book. Get the Art of Dancing, or what is it, Racing in the Rain, and read it together.
Racing in the Rain.
It'll slay you, but it's an awesome story that the family could talk about for hours and hours. Those types of skills can be taught both in the classroom and at home, but they need to be intentionally taught. And so make time, sit down and make the plans to do that with each other. And older brothers and sisters who might be listening, do it with your younger siblings. Teach them the value of reading. That's not just a skill that gets taught in a classroom. Sorry, I got on a little bit of a soapbox.
No, that's perfectly fine. Julio, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, if I could add to Dr. Woodward's point about staff versus volunteers, and again, we could use volunteers in any number of ways, but there's also a possibility of repurposing classified staff to other staff that may be able to fit that model given the privacy issues and employment issues. So that's something that we may want to explore.
Yeah, I would really encourage you to do that. I know you're looking for, later on we're going to be talking about budget issues as well, and there's challenges across the school district. So I appreciate that, trying to find appropriate alternatives for some of our staff. That would be great. I'd like to hear what the other board members have to say and in the public comment, but I, again, just really wanted to thoroughly express my appreciation for the amount of work and thoughtfulness that went into this plan.
Valerie, comments, questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Maher. I too, like the rest of the trustees, want to also just express my appreciation for everybody, all of the staff that's worked on this all summer long and prior to that. The communication to the public and to parents, the transparency, the getting feedback from everyone with the forums, and I think you've done an incredible job. So you have something to be very proud of. I think you've really, cast the net out wide to get as much feedback and input as you possibly could. So I want to thank you for all of your efforts, all of your time on this whole entire subject. It's not an easy feat by any stretch. So thank you for all of that. I do have a lot of questions. I did ask a lot ahead of time, and some other trustees asked some that I had written down. I did get a few comments recently from parents that I would like to ask. So one I think was touched on, but primarily for like band and strings and middle school band, is there an option to have that taught remotely in some capacity?
So I'd have to say, Trustee Arkin, that in the spring, we saw how innovative our music teachers were. I attended some amazing string and band concerts and choir concerts at the middle school level and the high school level, and quite frankly, also at the elementary level. And so the talent of our teachers to be able to innovate and adapt and engage our students, and it was very, very powerful. And so I have to say that to do it through a different platform like Edgenuity, probably not so much, but to be able to do it with our talented teachers and to trust that they learned so much in the spring and that they'll continue to engage our students, I believe we can continue to do that. It won't be quite the same as being together, but I hold out hope that we can, at some point in time, bring our students back, and if nothing else, be in a way outside or someplace far away, and they can at least do that. But I believe that we can continue to sustain our music program. We're proud of it in PUSD, and we have amazing teachers that are also very proud of it, and they want this to sustain because they know that at some point in time, our kids are coming back, and we need to be ready.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we'd have a lot of happier parents if we could do that. So that's one thing. I did changing the schedules. I believe this was from a high school parent, changing the schedules before the actual registration. That came up as, I guess some parents are concerned with maybe classes that their students picked. Maybe they want to change that. Maybe they don't think they would work as well online and want to do something different. Will there be an opportunity for them to be able to change their schedule before the registration?
So I'm going to pass this to Director Gruelle, who has experience. She's new to the secondary director role. She's doing a great job, but she also has a lot of experience in terms of how CUE operates. So she can answer that from a variety of perspectives.
Thank you. So if, as usual, when students return in secondary and they receive their schedule just before school starts, if there are classes that they wish to change or they've changed their mind over the summer with a course that they requested previously, they have an opportunity based on the procedure set at each school site to request those changes. So if someone is remaining in the hybrid model, returning initially remote, eventually hopefully in person, those schedules, that change process would follow the usual. As far as flex goes, I believe once the option is indicated for if a family is choosing flex for a student, then the students who are selecting flex would make their course selections in CUE in late July, and that will be detailed out in the letter that's going out this week. And they would choose from those courses that are listed on the website that Ms. Pereira has put together.
Okay, I think this was pertaining to the remote at first and then hybrid, just with the types of classes. So, okay, that was one parent input that would like that opportunity for their child to be able to switch beforehand, before the registration. The other question I have is with the, again, we're remote at first, but the TK to 2, the AM PM recommendation, as I thought about it, as I've gotten a lot of feedback as well from parents about it, it seems a little, and I know there's pros and cons to each model. It seems a little bit, with that age group especially, the logistics seem a little bit hard with the cleaning protocols that will have to take place in a very short amount of time, considering all of the surfaces and items and books and desks and doorknobs and everything that children will touch. Is this, I mean, I would have rather seen the 2-1-2 option picked, but could you elaborate a little more on why that option with the cleaning protocols, why that was picked?
Well, I'm going to jump in and take that one first and answer it a different way maybe than you're anticipating. I want everyone to understand that we will not bring forward an option that we do not believe we can accomplish according to the health guidance. And so if we don't think we can get the cleaning taken care of, we won't offer it as an option. So I think that's the most, just a base statement that I want to make. And then Ahmad, if you want to jump in and talk specifically about the protocols, you can, but we're just not going to go there. If we can't accomplish it according to the guidelines that the Public Health Department has issued, we will say no.
Okay, that's come up a lot with parents. Yeah. So
I understand, and we have to build. It's a part of that community trust building, right? We've got to communicate the plan multiple times, not just once. We've got to let people ask questions and respond to it and show them the plans. And so there's a step yet that the facilities department needs to do where they can show the cleaning schedule and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But from a larger 30,000 foot view, I just want our families and community members to know that I will not greenlight a plan that staff has not shown me that they can accomplish. It's just important to me that people know that. They're going to we got to learn how to trust each other. My responsibility is to take care of these kids and to take care of our teachers. And we're not going to put them at risk.
Right. Okay. Well, that's come up because it does seem to be a challenge.
Valerie, if I could just add, there are multiple, one of the reasons we felt comfortable with that model is with less students in the school, almost half the students, and going to a morning and afternoon, there are a variety of things we could do. In addition to having less kids, we could look at each cohort being in their own classroom. So the AM is in a particular classroom, a PM is in another classroom. As well as bringing additional resources to the school by not having the secondary schools in session. And then even if we have to clean, let's say, a kindergarten classroom between two sessions, we would then have more manpower to do that type of cleaning, as well as not, each kid has their own books and supplies. So there's a lot of details in there, but we feel comfortable that we could meet the guidelines for that.
Okay. Good to hear. Thank you. Okay. And this is a question that, just kind of looking for a little bit advice to give to the public. I know we only have control over so many things, but I have gotten some input about, working parents concerned with children at home, working at home. They have to go to work. If they are no longer able to work at home, a lot of people are transitioning back to going into the workplace. They can't leave small children at home. Some don't even want to leave their high schoolers or middle schoolers alone at home and responsible for their whole entire online instruction by themselves. So is there any advice or any guidance that you can put forth that it's a tough one, because I understand the situation, and I don't know how parents are going to deal with this, but any suggestions?
So just a couple of things, and then I'm going to turn over to Ed, because I know he's got some thoughts about this issue too. First of all, I want to make sure that I step back a little bit when talking about keeping people safe. The words didn't come out. All of the words didn't come out. When I talk about keeping staff safe, I don't just mean teachers. I mean classified staff members and administrators and anybody that volunteers, anybody that comes onto our campus. We want to make sure that they're safe in their work environment. And so it's not just about keeping teachers and kids safe. It's about keeping all of our folks that we're responsible for safe. So having said that, transitioning back to your other question, none of us wanted this. And I think all of us have family members that are struggling with that issue related to, employment and getting to work and having kids at home. I've had many conversations with my niece and her first grade son. She's a single mom and she has to work. And so they're having the same struggles down in Southern California. And so what I've asked Ed and his team to do is to collaborate with childcare agencies outside of the school system to see how we might be able to help facilitate, referrals of parents to those organizations. And I think, Ed, you might want to take that a little bit further.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Haglund. And Trustee Arkin, I think the answer I'll try and give you is it's a multi-layered answer. What I mean by that is we definitely want to support our community, but thinking again about our staff's safety, we have to balance that out some way, somehow. And I don't know the answers tonight, but we have Kids Club, which is our K-5 childcare program here in the district. We also have STEAM Preschool. And then we have our Horizon Early Education Center for our infants. So during the summer, there was very specific guidance from Alameda County Public Health, and we used that very specific guidance to open our programs. And so it's been open now for a few weeks and going fairly well. And so we have a number of students, infant all the way up to grade 5, who are participating in that program, and it's a full day childcare program, again, with very specific guidance that we were able to follow to meet the health and safety requirements. Now, they call it summer childcare program. So summer childcare will end once we start the fall semester, or fall, when we reopen schools. So I'm anxiously awaiting what that could possibly look like. So what does that mean for childcare programs that schools run? What's the licensing look like for private agencies that provide childcare to the community? So that's sort of one layer. The second piece, as Dr. Haglund mentioned, is us reaching out to community partners that could potentially provide that childcare for us, and maybe they expand their services. If we're able to expand our services, given some guidance from public health, we'll look into that. We'll plan for that. So like I said, I don't have the answer, but I think I can answer in the way of, let's look at our internal programs. Can we sustain it? Can we keep it open? Can we expand it? And then look at our community partners to see who we could possibly talk to who can provide childcare for our community. So it's a big question. It's an important question as we look at remote.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I understand there's no easy answer for it, but it has been brought up. So, okay. Thank you for all of that. And I just want to say I appreciate staff coming forward with the recommendation to have all remote learning right now and not reopen right now. I appreciate the direction on that. I think we all agree that the health and safety of our students and our staff is the top priority we have, and we have to keep people safe. And I know teachers that are very anxious to get back in the classroom and miss kids, and our kids want to get back to school, and they all want to do that, and we hope to do that when it's safe to do so. But I think this is the right decision that the right direction that you have given, and we've got to do the right thing. So I appreciate all of that. I also, like Trustee Maher mentioned, the whole presentation with the addressing the social and emotional health and our wellness website. Thank you for doing that. That is a really important piece of us going forward, because that's one thing that we really do need to look at and make sure our students are being supported in that area. And thank you again, too. I think it was already brought up about the professional development, and that there will be more opportunities for teachers and more time before school starts and ongoing, I'm sure, as they, learning how to deliver the online instruction. So thank you for all of that. And I think that's all I have. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Yee.
Okay, I have a lot of stuff. I don't know where to start, but you guys asked a lot of the questions that I had, so I won't go into it, but I do want to tag on to a couple of things. And I, too, really, really, really appreciate all of our staff who volunteered their time to really work to put these plans together. They put a lot of time in. It was something they didn't have to do, but I think it just is a testament to how committed and dedicated our staff are to our district, our students, and our community. It's just amazing. You don't see that around the state too much in other districts. And also, I really appreciate our families for being really patient and, letting us build this plane while we're flying, because that's basically what we're doing. Hopefully I think it's all going to work fine. And actually, maybe this remote learning thing gives us a little bit more time to work a few things out that would, the on-site issues. But I kind of wanted to kind of tag on to what Joan and Steve were saying about pushing for a target date. I think it's really hard. I mean, public health, in the beginning, they were looking at the data like 2 to 4 weeks out and then making a decision. Now they're doing 4 to 6 weeks out before they make a decision. And if you look at the predictive models that they've been using, the percentage of infections that have been happening over the last few weeks, actually, if you look at the predictive models, it'll show that, we're basically going to have a huge medical system surge by the end of August, is what's being predicted. So we're really between this rock and a hard place, right? Like, we want our families to get back to work. We need our kids back at school. Businesses want to get open, and businesses are relying on schools to be open so that they can have their kids go to school so they can go back to work. We're really between this rock and a hard place, and it's just so frustrating that we can't give anybody a real definite answer about anything. We're just all going to have to be patient, and we're all just going to have to try really, really hard to social distance and wear those masks. The contact tracers, they know where the infections are coming from, and they're mostly coming from family gatherings, people that are getting together with their friends. It wasn't from the protest. It's from family gatherings. So we just all need to make good decisions and be smart and try our best to help slow the spread or get rid of the spread, I guess, is what we should be moving to. But I had a couple of kind of more practical questions. I am glad, though, that I really feel like school isn't going to be the same way that it was in spring, for many different reasons. One, we have to track the attendance. We have to do real grading. We have to track and prove the minutes that we're teaching the kids. Our teachers have had more training. They've had more time to plan. We're all a little bit more organized. But I think the angst kind of comes in with, the parents having that experience from the spring of saying, they had to sort of teach their kids, and they're like, oh, great, I don't want to have to do this again. But I think that we all just have to have a different mindset. We have to, allow our kids to take the responsibility for their own education like they normally would if they were showing up on school campuses. And I kind of am thinking about the middle school kids, who struggle with a lot of that development stuff in middle school anyway. So what does it look like now when they have to do this online learning? So I'm and tagging on to the emotional learning stuff is there going to be something a little bit more geared towards middle school in making good decisions, taking more responsibility, as they're really jumping, through some pretty big social and emotional development hoops during those middle school years. So I don't know if you want to jump in and answer that, Ed, if there's some thought about particular age groups.
Yeah, I think that the current curriculum that we have, and Ms. Reif described it, and please join in if you want, Kathleen, that is targeted for specific age groups. So we'll look at that curriculum, again, see how we can build it into the lesson planning and build some units. But that is kind of structured already by grade level.
Yeah, I'm hoping that time management is something that's in there, because when you're home, it's really different. And some time management skills, I think, would be really great.
I can check on the time management piece, but I'm not sure if that's a specific unit, but I know there's other skills that support that as well. So I'll double check on that.
Yeah, I just know that a lot of parents are kind of having that angst, which I think leads them into that whole thing that we've heard from parents of like, oh no, we need our kids to be in front of the screen for 6 hours. They need to do their regular bell schedule all on computer. And, and maybe Dr. Haglund should reiterate how he feels about that again, as he so eloquently talked about reading. I think you're going to have your own reading group with first graders. I can just see it coming. But yeah, can you just say that again about, you know, the whole cameras in the classroom, kids being on the screens for 6 hours. Can you just go over that again, why you're not a fan of that?
Well, it's not developmentally appropriate for students to be sitting in front of a computer for that long of a period of time. And each grade level has a different amount of screen time that's appropriate. So we need to do a good job of, you know, one of the training things, I don't know that we talk about this, but I want to make sure that we do. Some of the professional development that we need to develop is related to for the parents, so that they can understand how they can do an effective job of supporting their student at home, not in a, you know, a dictatorial way, but here's some strategies that might work for you. Part of that could include what's appropriate at different age levels in terms of how much time, sustained time, that you sit in front of a computer, or how often do you need to get them up and moving around and doing something different. Because we do not want to produce a generation of students that are sedentary and have health issues because they sat in front of computers for long periods of time. It's not in anybody's best interest. And if you were to walk through any one of our classrooms, just follow one of our great elementary school teachers around for a day, they're not standing in front of that classroom for that many hours. They're touching base with kids. They're giving a little bit of instruction and then setting kids off to practice, or they're teaching a piece of a lesson and then asking the students to talk about it with each other and then report back out. They're not standing in front of the room talking at kids all the time. It's the same thing in the high schools. They don't stand in front of the classroom and just stand and deliver a lesson. You know, a good teacher is interactive with the students. They want to make sure that they're approaching the lesson from multiple different vantage points and different learning modalities, because every kid in that room doesn't learn in the same way. And good teachers know that. So they try to shift their instructional delivery model to make sure that every kid is engaged and benefiting from the lesson in the classroom. That's not going to, as that teacher's bouncing around the classroom, if we were to try to put cameras up and just record them, number one, the camera wouldn't know where to go and it would be bouncing around all the time. I think Bree Dreyfus said it would make people nauseous if they followed her around in her science classroom. So that's not a strategy that I ever would have supported, and the group that was supporting it has abandoned it. So we just know that was never something that we should have been thinking about for students that are of this age group. And so I don't know if that was the message you wanted me to give.
Yes,
I think there's an opportunity, especially at the middle schools, to really kind of double down and push out the curriculum that we use within our AVID classes, because that does talk about time management and it does talk about organizational skills. And so there's some opportunities there that we might be able to roll out as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think people need to hear that over and over, because they want their kids to be occupied for 6 hours, I think. A couple of other questions. This is kind of maybe a little bit in the weeds, but generally our principals and our staff counselors are all off the month of July. But you know, a lot of the parents have questions, and I know that it feels like our executive staff is fielding all the questions for all the families. And I'm wondering when the principals are back online and counselors are back online, so that they can actually help their students at their schools, answer questions and help them navigate some of this.
So, Janelle, you can jump in there a second, but let me say something first. Our principals have been online since the school got out in June. They are working very hard. They've been members of the task force. They've been engaged in conversations about what school should look like, and they're now engaged with us in the planning process for the professional development and whatnot. And so, I just want to make sure that parents understand that principals haven't taken time off. They've been working very hard with us in this planning process, and they were, I think, actually encouraged when we finally settled on a plan that they can now start to take back and do work with at their school sites with their teams. So, Dr. Woodward, maybe you want to embellish that a little bit.
Well, Dr. Hagman, I just wanted to reiterate that Our principals and our vice principals, along with the rest of the team here at the district office, they have just been working tirelessly, and have made themselves available. I know that I see emails that they're responding to parents with, and so I'm very appreciative of that. Having said that, they may have taken a day or two and gone someplace where there's peace and quiet and no internet, just in order to get a little bit restored, and I certainly think that they needed that time. So having said that, they should be returning. The deadlines or the calendars for them to come back are not necessarily set, but we do see a greater return to school as we near the end of July. I do know that they will be going through their emails, and if there are questions that have been asked from parents, that they will get answered. Sometimes if there's a delay, it's because the answers do not exist quite yet, and we're still uncertain. So I think after moving forward, that we should have some greater clarity, and we should be able to provide parents with additional direction.
All right, thanks. And just for the public's information, all the principals do report to Dr. Woodward. She's their boss. So another question about principals. Normally, when everybody's on school site, the principals make lots of observations in classrooms, right? This is how they're evaluating and coaching their teachers and things like that. So how is that going to still continue when we're in this remote environment?
So that will continue in the same way that we did in spring, except for, I would say, with greater experience now. So our principals have been visiting their classrooms. They just don't do it physically, but they can drop in. They will have the schedules of their teachers. I know that I've been invited to drop in with principals, and we have visited classrooms. So it's sort of just back in the pre-COVID times, we would do a classroom walkthrough. We do the same thing. We just do it virtually, and all of a sudden we drop in and we're there. So our principals are engaged. I know of numerous instances where our principals are also co-teaching lessons with teachers, or they're doing reading to students in the classrooms, and they're observing lessons of their teachers while they're teaching. So there are many things that will continue as we move forward. In addition, our principals maintained and our vice principals work with our teachers through regular staff meetings. They had times in which they checked in with grade level teams. They continue those things that happened during the school year. They just found a way to do it differently. So I would expect that would all continue, and that it would be even strengthened as we are now not shifting on a dime and we've had time to plan.
Great, thanks. I hope that's helpful for a lot of our parents who've been wondering that. And then my last question is there a possibility that there could be some demos of what an online class would look like in the different grade levels, just so that parents have some expectation of, like, this is what, are the best practices as we're doing this online algebra class or chemistry class? Because I think maybe a lot of parents just don't have any idea, like, what it looks like. And a lot of them have wanted to actually, get into the class and be online with them so they could see what it's like. And, for privacy reasons, we're not, I guess that's not happening. But is there a way that they can get some sort of demo and see what the online classes look like? Or you can think about that and get back to us.
I like the idea. I'm trying to think of how we do that while protecting student privacy.
Well, maybe it's not with students. Maybe it's the teacher doing a demo without students there, so parents can see what it's like.
Yeah, I think that's probably doable. We can look into that. I know that we already have received some sample lessons, sometimes from teachers, that we could maybe share. So we'll look into that. Trustee Yee.
Okay, thanks.
I have one more question, Trustee Maher. For students who are struggling, today they can get, there's tutoring after school and that type of thing. And of course, there's the flex periods in the various schools. What extra supports will we have for students who are struggling?
So I'm very glad that you asked that question, Trustee Miller. I'd like to ask Director Galletti to weigh in on that. I know that she has worked with our intervention specialists at the elementary level and also at the high school level. So would you like to shed some light on some of the things that happened? And then maybe Director Peretta Pereira, last year what we learned and how we were able to provide tutoring.
Sorry, I needed to unmute. Yes, during our spring remote learning, we actually piloted the program Lexia, which is a reading intervention program, and we had great success with it because it pairs very well with teaching as well. So we could progress monitor the students and how they were doing, and then the intervention specialist could oversee each student's individual progress, and then the program actually would send the teachers what skills that they would then need to reinforce in small group work. But thinking globally on just students who are struggling, it's going to be very similar to normal times. When we are providing instruction, we're looking for all of our students. How are they doing? Are they able to access the curriculum? Do they need reteaching? Are they not understanding the curriculum? Where will we pull a small group to maybe do a small group reteaching? Where will we provide enrichment for those who are beyond it? And so that, I'm kind of talking about the RTI cycle, which can happen virtually too. We just are lucky that we have our intervention specialists, and now we're hoping to possibly introduce the Lexia as another way to progress monitor it as we go. We then were able, and in a minute I'll pass it on to Director Pereira, because they set up some systems in summer school where they were really able to look at the individual students and how they were doing, because one of the things we also might need to intervene on is engagement. And so that's part of SB 98 as well, and tracking attendance, because there might be two folds of intervention this time. By that, I mean one intervention that a student is having difficulty understanding the material being taught. Two, the student isn't having difficulty and is capable, but distance learning is hard for them and there is disengagement. And so that would be an intervention as well of how we engage the student. And Director Pereira, if you could talk a little bit about the system you set up in summer school, because I'd like to continue and replicate that for all of our grade levels as we move forward.
Sure. So in summer school, as you know, we went full remote. And so our staff was obviously concerned about how we would provide intervention for students that weren't with us in our spaces. So we set up a tiered model of intervention based on metrics. And so if a student met any of the metrics, the sort of the base level is that the student is doing fine, the student is attending, student is participating, student is achieving the standards that have been set forth for them. So that's the baseline. And then that student is just progress monitored by the teacher. And then if they don't meet any of those baseline benchmarks, then they move into progressive intervention. And basically what that looked like is we set up a system where the teacher would they would fill out a form. That form would generate an email and then a spreadsheet. It would go to a variety of people in the organization. It would generate an email home to the parent so that they knew that the student was going to be referred for intervention. And again, depending on the severity, sometimes they were assigned to mandatory tutoring where they had to show up in a Zoom room and have a one-on-one tutor. Sometimes we had to have our social workers reach out, et cetera. So again, just depending on the level of intervention that they needed. So that worked out really well in summer school. And so we're looking at utilizing that during the school year. Additionally, we continue to explore the use of our digital tools. We do have access to something called PathBlazer in elementary school, and this is for intervention and enrichment. And this is the product that interfaces with our math assessments, and so can target students at their needs. So we'll be building that in for our elementary students as well. And then in high school, summer school, we also had students were able to sign up for tutoring, just like they could during the spring. And that was pretty well utilized as well. So we'll continue to enhance those processes to make sure that all students have access. I know we offered it in the spring, but it didn't necessarily make it to all of the kids. I heard from some students in summer that they didn't know that we had tutoring in the spring. So to the point that somebody made it earlier about communication, making sure that we can do that. I'm working this summer with our entire curriculum team we are developing some digital coherence. So trying to use one space for kids to sign on and access everything that they use. And we think that that would be helpful for communication as well. And then to be sure that we're providing the intervention that the kids need.
Anything else, Mark? Okay, Mark, anything else?
No. Fine. Thank you. Great answers, guys. Really.
Okay, at this time, go to comments from parents and audience. And I think, Patrick, you have a list of people?
Good evening, President Maher. Yes, I do. We have quite a few, which is great. I wanted to just double check if we wanted to start as discussed with
yes,
APT President
yes.
Michelle Verkuylen, and then Laura Martinez, followed by Derek Dressler, former Foothill student board member.
Okay.
So Michelle, feel free to take it away if you're still with us.
I am. Thank you. Good evening, President Maher, members of the board, Dr. Haglund, members of the cabinet, and our community. I am Michelle Verkuylen, president of the Association of Pleasanton Teachers. I come here this evening in appreciation of the many hours of work we have done together as a district thus far. Our educators, our classified staff, our administrators. Thank you for including us in the work that most directly affects our students. Thank you for listening to our voices. As with all, what is utmost on our mind is the continued health and safety of our students, our colleagues, our families, and our community. As we all know too well these days, what we do as an individual impacts everyone we come in contact with. In a 2-week time period, there was a 65% increase in cases of children ages 0 to 17 in the state of California. It is with all this in mind that we are pleased with the recommendation to begin school in full remote learning, which is the only choice that can be made at this time to keep everyone safe. With that, we are also saddened that the pandemic has arisen again to such a level that impedes our ability to be in person with students. We have chosen to teach students as our life's work, and to not be able to do so in person affects us in ways that most cannot understand. But we are determined to make the best of things, as we always do, and bring our knowledge and passion of our work to our students in whatever mode we need to. As have been stated before, the most important criteria we must use in moving forward into a new school year is the health and safety of all. We cannot educate if we are all not safe. We hope to continue an ongoing dialogue to collaborate on the details of each model to ensure appropriate learning environments for all. I am always so impressed with the level of expertise and knowledge our APT members bring to the conversation. They research and share, question, and recommend with their minds and their hearts on their charges, their students. I know the budget is also on the agenda tonight and at the forefront of our minds. APT is grateful that our governor and legislators have come together to create an education-friendly budget, even in this challenging economic time. They realize that education should not cease during this pandemic, and they have created paths so that we can continue to support and fill the minds and souls of those who we teach and counsel. We encourage our board and those in our district who are tasked with the budget to ensure that all expenditures are kept with students in mind. I'm sure you all have heard of degrees of separation, and any budget decision that is made should be made as close to students as is possible within 1 or 2 degrees. That would include ensuring the facilities they return to are safe, that their teachers and support staff have all the materials and technology they need to implement a robust education as we begin in August, that we have professional development we need to provide these services, that there is sufficient staffing to lift our students, not only academically, but also socially and emotionally. We must be conscientious stewards of the monies that are provided to us to educate our youth. Thank you again and in advance for collaborating and keeping all of us safe and healthy. We send out thoughts for the safety, healthy, and well-being of all of our students, families, and community because Pleasanton students deserve the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I think Laura wasn't going to speak. Is she on there?
You're correct, President Maher. I was told that Laura will not be joining us. Before we move forward, I just wanted to reiterate, in the interest of time, we want to make sure that everybody's heard, but to please respect our 2-minute time limit for everyone that's submitted public comment. On that same note, we are going to close our submission for public comment. So anyone that would like to comment on this discussion can do so via email. We're always open to feedback and input electronically. And finally, a lot of information has been shared tonight. So for folks that had comments or questions early on, and the questions have since been answered, we'd ask you to please to just please I guess respect the time, and if your questions have been answered, you can just simply state that or send us an email and save any specific questions relating to your student for private correspondence, as this is a public meeting. And with that, I will move on to Mr. Derek Dressler. Governor, go for it.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, good evening, President Maher, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Hagland, Executive Cabinet, and of course, Pleasanton community. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Derek Dressler, and it's been my honor this past year, as Mr. Gannon mentioned, to have served as the student board representative and student body president for Foothill High School. Tonight, however, I come to you as a representative, not of a high school, but of my peers. During the past few weeks, I have received countless emails, texts, and calls from students, teachers, and parents regarding the ever-concerning matter of safely reopening our schools. While there have been many individual appeals and certainly concerns voiced, one common theme emerged from all of my conversations. Families need to have the option to send their kids to school. This is not a one-size-fits-all matter, nor is there ever a perfect solution to such a complex problem as this. And while I appreciate the Cabinet's truly diligent work on drafting tonight's remote learning recommendation, for some families, starting school remotely on August 11th simply isn't possible. That is why tonight I implore you, the Board of Trustees, to think of the greater good of our diverse Pleasanton Unified School District community and adopt a hybrid model at every level, starting in-person instruction on August 11th. I fully expect this board to adhere to all health guidelines. However, I also expect you to take into account the risk you could be putting families in should a hybrid model not be adopted at all levels. And in closing, I truly do want to say this. This district has said repeatedly that they will not reopen schools until they feel safe, that they can do it safely for students and staff. That's great, but we might be in the same predicament we are now for years to come. It must not be about when we can reopen schools safely, but how we can reopen in-person schooling for our families safely on August 11th. And I know from personal experience that the staff in this district could get it done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, Patrick, ready to go. How many do we have?
We have over 20.
Okay.
So next up, we will have Devansh Pandey, followed by Kumar, and then Srividya Karthik. So Devansh, if you're still with us, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hello, trustees, superintendent, cabinet, and members of the community. I would like to give the utmost commendation to each of the amazing district officials who created this model, as well as each member of the steering committee. The current plan is robust. That being said, there are a few important considerations that I hope district officials, as well as the board, will make. First and foremost, getting student input is absolutely crucial going forward. Unfortunately, there is a constant dearth of student representation, and the task force and steering committee are no different. Students need to be part of those bodies and decisions. This issue affects students more than anyone else, and the district must genuinely work to create meetings and sessions that feature students and allow students to ask questions and give feedback. Second, I would like to emphasize that once students do go back to school, the 2-1-2 model is an order of magnitude better than the 4-1 model. The ability to go to school each week is crucial for continuity of learning, and the cons of the 4-1 model far, far outweigh the pros. Finally, I would like to ask you this, because it has not been addressed. Students, especially those going into 6th or 9th grades, are feeling lost and unsure. How do you plan to ensure the transition into middle and high school goes well? Furthermore, what specific programs does the district plan to directly implement to ensure that the mental and social health of students remains well after 6 months or more of staying at home? Thank you, and to all members of the community, if you'd like an overview or recap of what was covered at today's meeting, don't hesitate to go to @pusd.updates on Instagram or Facebook to learn more.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Kumar. Are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, trustees, PUSD staff, and everyone. I'm Kumar Goginini, a parent, and have many concerns on the recommendation of PUSD. Why was the distant learning option removed from the second survey? Parents were forced to choose with 3 options. When remote learning has more strengths and less challenges, why is PUSD not giving that option for parents, students? PUSD listed challenges, and what are the remedies for the challenges? For example, how will PUSD ensure social distancing, face masks in school? How will PUSD ensure kids wash for 20 seconds as per CDC guidelines? How do you handle kids with no symptoms but have COVID-19? Symptoms of COVID-19 are similar to the symptoms that kids exhibit throughout the year. If students stayed home every time they had a cough or symptom, they would probably be absent more than present. How will PUSD address this issue? If a teacher or a student tests positive for COVID-19, how do you test, trace, and quarantine the kids and teachers? What happens to the teacher, and who will teach the class? If someone dies of COVID-19 from school, who will take liability, PUSD or the Board of Trustees? Labor laws prevent kids to work in dangerous conditions. Why does PUSD want to risk the lives of kids, teachers, and parents? Many school districts and universities are offering distance learning. The reason they are doing is because of the challenges that they cannot mitigate. PUSD is not showing mitigation plans, but PUSD still wants to move forward with the plan. Why? There is a sizable number of parents who don't want to send the kids to school until a vaccine or medicine is available. In the hybrid learning model, in 2-1-2 or 4-1-4 options, kids are still doing distance learning. Why is PUSD not offering 100% distance learning in hybrid model? Our top concern should be that everyone is healthy and safe. No single life should be lost due to PUSD policy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kumar. And
as you move forward, I wanted to mention that there were students on the steering committees and the committees. Dr. Woodward mentioned that students were involved with giving feedback.
thank you. And also just to clarify, for families that did choose the hybrid model previously on our planning survey, our recommendation is to start with full-time distance learning. So just wanted to say that as well. So next up, we have Stravidya Karthik, and then Steve Saul, followed by Aaron Salcido. So Stravidya, if you are with us, go ahead.
opportunity to share my views. Before I share any of my concerns, I first want to thank the school district for all the hard work that's gone into putting this plan together and responding to multiple emails from many parents. I am really glad to see the remote choice recommendation in the hybrid model, so that's a great move. However, for this concern is more for when we decide to slide into the in-class option and still some families who may not be comfortable sending their kids to school. So in that context, I kind of echo the distance learning option which was initially proposed, which got later taken away and got replaced with flex. And I'm not sure if there's going to be a vote on the flex option or it's considered approved, but I just wanted to share some of my concerns about the flex option. The proposed partner for the Flex Edgenuity has really bad reviews if you go online. It actually has a 1.2 star on a 5-star scale. And we also have some feedback from parents whose kids are in summer school using Edgenuity that the quality has been pretty poor with very little teacher interaction. So given the promise I know that PUST has of a world-class education, I'm really hoping we can reconsider this decision. Flex doesn't, again, offer all the courses, especially this is more relevant for high school kids. And, we've carefully chosen their courses on a 4-year plan. And this is forcing many families to pick hybrid or do part flex, part hybrid, again, putting the kids at risk, right? And logistical issues. So the other one is when the conditions do improve and kids might want to go back, then they have to wait a whole year before they return to the homeschool, which I understand the district is doing their best, but just wanted to point that out. So given all this, I think my simple request is this, to consider offering a distance learning attached to the homeschool as a continued option for families, even after the hybrid slides into in-class, to have a safe selection for the high school.
All right, thank you very much. So next up we have Steve Soul, followed by Aaron Salcido, and then Rachel Ensler. Steve, are you still with us?
Okay.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. Aaron Salcido, are you with us?
Do we have Aaron? Aaron?
Oh, I see she's on mute right now.
Okay, Aaron? Should we go to someone else and come back to Aaron for sake of time?
Sure. Next up, we have Rachel Ensler. Rachel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. Well, most of my concerns were answered in the presentation and by the question and answer with board members. So I'll just say thank you. I didn't want you to think I had disappeared. And I'll say goodbye.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Aaron, are you there now? Maybe she dropped off. I don't know. Okay, Patrick. Next.
All right, we'll go to next up. We have Nilafar Sinai, followed by Renli Tian and Aditi K. And we can always go back to Aaron Salcido if we're able to get the audio sorted out. So
Aaron? Aaron? Okay. Okay, Patrick, next.
all right, Nilafar Sinai, are you there? I'm not seeing.
Nilafar, are you there? Okay, next.
All right, we'll move on. Renli Tian, I see she's still with us.
Okay. Okay, you're on.
It's Wenley. Yeah, it's just pronunciation.
Okay, Wenley?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Wenli. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my appreciations to everyone for your great efforts on planning for the new school year. It's really a hard job. Thank you so much for your hard work. Well, many families are considering hybrid remote learning, but we still have some concerns and questions. So our parents raised 5 questions for you guys on hybrid remote learning. The first question is, in high school, there are more hours for independent learning, 18 periods each week, then Zoom time learning, 12 periods each week. So our question is, what support will be provided to independent learning periods to ensure the quality of learning? The second question is, for elementary students, the daily Zoom class includes up to 30 minutes of Zoom class teaching and 110 minutes of direct instructions with videos. So how about secondary school students? So for each Zoom period in high school, how many minutes the minimum would be for teaching, for Zoom teaching, and how many minutes would be for direct instructions? My third question is, so how to effectively manage and evaluate student learning for hybrid remote learning? So question 4, well, I noticed that Dr. Hagland mentioned that the teachers will be checking in each period, each day. So my question is there also a check-in for an independent learning period? For example, period 2, 4, and 6 on Monday when there is no Zoom time. Last question, will Edgenuity be used in hybrid remote learning or not? If yes, will it be used on the same way as Flex? Thank you. That's all my question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Wenli. And in the interest of time, we're gonna keep moving with public comment. So next up, and I did hear, thank you, Erin. Apologize for just having some technical difficulties, but I guess her comments and questions were resolved given the recommendation brought forth. So next up we have Aditi, followed by Nancy Brazil and Cindy Johnson Eckersley. So Aditi, are you still there?
Yep. Just give me 1 second. Let me pull up my thing. Okay, so since we only have 2 minutes, I'm going to talk super fast. I'm sorry if this makes it hard for you to hear. So I'm a student at Amador Valley High School, so thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So before I start my questions, I'd like to voice my opinion. I believe that we should start schools in remote learning as it's the best option with the least challenges and it's the safest option. An even better option would be to give students the choice to do remote learning from their home school throughout the entire year. This is because there are many concerns with growth going to school and the education quality of Flex. So my first question is regarding Ingenuity for Flex, and that was one of the questions you had proposed. And as Srividya said before, I noticed that the program has very low ratings, and there's very harsh feedback from kids who took this in summer school. So how's that information going to be taken into account, and how did you decide on the program? My second question is about Flex and teachers. So I'm currently taking a course online, and I was wondering how Flex would be structured, as in my online course I'm not learning as much as I would have if I would have taken the class in person or was able to meet my teacher regularly. So how often are teachers mandated to meet with their students, and are these meetings only check-ins, and if so, how will students be learning information? My third question is, how are you going to make sure that students maintain physical distancing rules in hybrid? Like, even though there are rules, it's possible that students may break them. My fourth question is, what types of assignments will be provided when students are not in school, so in Flex or for the hybrid remote part? And then I also wanted to say that, in my opinion, the results of the pre-registration intent survey were highly skewed, since the lack of comprehensive courses offerings and the de-enrollment from homeschool was suggested during the survey. So if you just polled on distance learning options versus the instruction now, and kept the course offerings and homeschool teachers constant in both options, I'm sure the numbers would be very different. So thank you again for letting me voice my opinions, and I hope you take what I said into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi. So next up we have Nancy Brazil, followed by Cindy Johnson Eckersley and Lynn Gatehouse. So Nancy, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I am an 8th grade block teacher and a reading intervention specialist at Harvest Park. And I am going to talk briefly about the MAP testing that we are ready to adopt. And I'm very concerned about MAP testing being able to be administered in an equitable manner. I think could potentially be spending a lot of money on this test that is supposed to provide information about reading strengths and weaknesses in our students. I've administered this test for the last 3 years, and while I believe it's a very good test with good data, it's a very sensitive test to give, and it is it's meant to be given in a classroom setting where a teacher can monitor the students and encourage them to do their best and take their time. And I'm really concerned that, this is going to be hard to do next year in a remote learning situation. What I would suggest we spend our money on is a plagiarism checker, like the high schools have. It really concerns me in terms of digital citizenship, to have our kids expected to write and be on the computer and not have any way for teachers to check them and kind of guide them and really get an authentic look at their capabilities. So that was just my 2 cents on MAP versus a plagiarism checker, which I think is a better way. Give MAP maybe a year until we're all back in the classroom and, have it come back then.
Thank you, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next we have Cindy Johnson Eckersley, followed by Lynn Gatehouse, and then John Yu. So Cindy, are you still with us? If so, go ahead.
Cindy, are you here? Cindy?
I see her on our list.
Yeah, I thought I heard her. Cindy?
Hello?
I barely hear her.
Yes, you might need to turn up your volume a little bit.
Cindy? Can you hear us? Volume, Cindy, we can't hear you. Okay. You want to move on and then come back? Okay.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah, so we'll move on, and Cindy, if you can turn up your volume, we can come back to you. So next is Lynn Gatehouse. Lynn, are you still with us?
Hi, Lynn, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, hello. I'm Lynn Gatehouse. I teach 6th grade block at Harvest Park Middle School, and I'm not going to say much because Nancy did a fabulous job explaining what I would have said. So I second her concern about MAP and how we would possibly utilize it in remote learning. And I think to spend money on it now doesn't make sense to me. And then I'd also like to say that Trustee Miller brought up how would we be screening vulnerable teachers and staff. You talked about the students, but not the staff. Would you be sending some sort of a survey out to people to determine vulnerable teachers and staff? Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Lynn. Please.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Ms. Eckersley, do you want to do a quick sound check to see if we can hear you again? Otherwise, we'll keep moving and we can come back to you.
Can we hear you? Okay, let's move on and then we'll come back.
All right, so next we have John Yu, followed by Tricia Kelly, and then Janelle Sloan. So John, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Hey, firstly, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Firstly, thanks for organizing this meeting, and all the thanks to everyone for the hard work on the tentative plans, and also numerous meetings we had. So really appreciate that. I'm a parent of two kids. One is a high school student. One is fifth grader. Going to be fifth grader. I think, unfortunately, some of the concerns from the beginning are still there. I think for Flex, it's always been, curriculum selection, who's teaching, how easy to transition to in-person. And on the other hand, for hybrid, we're concerned about 2-on-2. It's not very clear to us that it seems to be they are taking only 2 days of class, but the other 2 days is a little bit in flux. So on the other hand, we do see, many parents feel it's possible to have a solution which combines some of the benefits from both options. And to Dr. Hagland's concern about tracking camera, other things, health, these kind of things, I think, number one, we don't need a tracking camera. We love to be more interactive, but for the students, but I think there's some sacrifice we need to make. So based on that, I only have two questions. Number one is for the 2-on-2 option in the hybrid model. Can the students have basically 4 days class the same way, basically for all the students? I hope the answer is yes, because it just requires basic technologies, computer camera, projector, Zoom meeting, and some software. The second question is basically, can students opt out of the in-person if they really want to be remote? So with that said, basically, I'm hoping that, Flex is not even needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. We will keep moving. Tricia Kelly, then Janelle Sloan, and Brian Hanafi. So Tricia, are you with us?
Tricia, are you with us? Hey, Patrick, maybe we'll come back.
Sorry, I had
Oh,
to hit
there
the
she is.
unmute button.
We got it? Okay.
Hey, good evening, everyone. First of all, okay, Sammy, stop growling, stop. I have a dog who is trying to prevent my talking. I just want to thank everyone on this call, everyone at the board, the district levels, all the parents, all the teachers. I know you guys have worked extremely hard, not just over the summer, but since even before we went into shelter in place. So thank you. I really do appreciate your hard work. So I just want to first start out by saying, so I am a single parent, full-time single parent. I work full-time. I have a daughter who just finished 2nd grade and is going into 3rd grade. And I want to say, I'm extremely concerned that the district is considering starting the students fully remote. Without going into too much detail, our experience was very, very difficult after the shelter in place. We did not have a single Zoom session with our teacher until after 42 days of going into shelter in place. There wasn't one attempt that was made for anyone to call my daughter, to reach out to her, or to have a single Zoom session with any of the students in this class. And I found that very frustrating. I do understand that there were a lot of challenges, and I felt that I was very patient at first, but 42 days of no contact with a 2nd grader, in my opinion, is not world-class education. And then I just want to get into some facts. And first of all, I want to really thank Joan Larson and Derek Dressler for speaking up. I do share very similar sentiments. First of all, just some facts. The population for Alameda County, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, is 1.67 million people. Today, according to the Alameda County Department of Public Health, we have 8,342 cases in Alameda County. That is less than a half of a whole % infection rate for our county. Yet with this number being so low, I'm very concerned that we are making a decision to not allow our kids to come back to school. Your survey results showed that 84% of parents favored the hybrid model, which includes mostly on-campus instruction. And so I don't understand the district's decision to even consider beginning with full-time remote learning. As Dr. Haglund stated, the Alameda County Department of Health provides guidelines, not requirements. And so this district does have the ability to make its own decision, as opposed to just following what other decisions are being made by other school districts. The concerns that I have is, my daughter already missed a quarter of her school year last year. She's going into 3rd grade, which is a critical year for foundations in math and other subject matters. I have a very high demanding job. At first it was possible to micromanage her school day, and then it became impossible. And so I just want to ask you guys to please consider the parents in my situation and consider the kids. These kids want to go back to school. If we don't put them back now, what's the point of even considering putting them back at a later date when you guys don't even have an established timeline of when you might consider starting full time? If we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. And that's going to be another whole school year that our kids are going to be missing out on critical education.
I'm sorry,
Tricia. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, we're over time right now. You're more than welcome to email any of us with additional concerns, but we just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. All right, and I received an email that Janelle Sloan, her questions have been answered, so we're going to move on to Brian Hannafy. Brian, are you with us? If so, go ahead.
Am I audible now?
You are.
Thank you. Over the weekend, the total number of cases reported by the CDC exceeded 1% of the U.S. population. And just today, the number of reported cases per 100,000 population in Pleasanton exceeded 200. The spread of COVID-19 is clearly on the rise and at rates that indicate exponential spread. In this circumstance, the absolute number of cases can rise extremely quickly. While all the science is not in, we do know for sure that the new infections can take 1 to 2 weeks to become symptomatic. That means students, teachers, and staff who do not yet have any symptoms, who do not yet have a high temperature, may still knowingly spread virus in Pleasanton schools. There's also a new strain identified as D614G, implicated in the rapid spread of ever younger and healthier victims throughout the United States and Europe. This strain could invalidate much of the earlier understanding about the extent that COVID-19 affects and spreads among children. Because it's so new, it's also possible that vaccines now in development will not be as effective against the strain. In the face of all this, sadly, the decisions being taken in the fight against this virus, and even the decisions merely to collect data, often appear motivated more by political considerations than by scientific knowledge. As a result, PUSD may face a situation where the county, state, or federal government exerts pressure to open, but the conditions are not clearly safe. I ask that the plan adopted by the board for reopening of schools explicitly address under what circumstances PUSD would reach a decision that reopening is not in the best interest of Pleasanton children, teachers, staff, and wider community, and therefore when PUSD would not reopen in person, even when allowed to do so by the county or other levels of government. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Next up, we have Kelly Makashi, followed by Chong Wang, and then his name looks familiar, Heidi Maher.
How many more do we have here, Patrick?
We have, after Heidi, we have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, because we'll have to extend our meeting as it is. So.
All right, good evening. I'm Kelly Makashi, a candidate to serve on the PUSD Board of Trustees. I would like to take a moment to thank Dr. Haglund, Dr. Woodward, the entire PUSD leadership team and cabinet, and the trustees of the board for their efforts on developing a safe and effective plan for reopening schools. As a parent who has also recently served on the steering committee, I can attest to the collaborative efforts made to ensure the safety of our children and teachers come first, while at the same time communicating and listening to all stakeholders involved. Trustees, as you make your decisions tonight, please keep the following points in mind. As we face the new normal for remote learning for the start of the school year, and in order to achieve the district organizational goal number 1, including, quote, the implementation of research-based assessment strategies, unquote, it's critical to ensure there is consistency of authentic, meaningful assessments. For example, more robust assessments may be needed to supplement the assessments provided through Edgenuity. And also, our children need more meaningful feedback in many different formats, regardless of the grade level. In compliance with SB 98, which places a strong emphasis on teacher-student engagement and distance learning, please be mindful of what those effective strategies for engagement and motivation will be, not only for students, but for the teachers and for parents as well. For example, parents may need help with implementation specific strategies to help keep their children to stay engaged and motivated with distance learning. Last, I ask, what options are available for parents who have to work, including essential workers and teachers? Specifically in regards to the remote learning model, we must think outside the box for how daycare providers can work in partnership with PUSD to actually assist with the instructional support for our students with their remote learning, not just daycare. Thank you. Good evening.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Next up, we have Chang Wang, followed by Heidi Maher, and then Jerry Ann May. So Chang, if you're with us, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Chong Wang. I want to say thank you. I do appreciate your hard work. We have a very good discussion about the various learning model for the student for the next school year. Now I would like to talk about the student mental health. COVID-19 put a lot of stress on everyone. Our students have a very special semester in the last school year. As a parent, I know that some of the students run into various issues, such as not turning homework, sleeping until noon, during the weekday, and etc. I do know some of the counselors talked about the students who ran into the issue in the last semester. I really appreciated that. I know that some students select a hybrid just because they want to have a social life at school. So I think that the school district and the schools need to have a plan and take proactive actions. Is it possible that we use the latest technology to provide the student social activity virtually, such as creating virtual social bubble or study groups? So just some kind of sort. Thanks for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chang. Next up, we have Heidi Maher, followed by Jerry Ann May, and then Brian DeBose.
Hello, my name is Heidi Maher, no relation to Steve. I just want to say thank you to everyone for all of your hard work. You guys have been trying to shoot darts in the dark blindfolded. So thank you. My question and my concern is that if we have our high school kids, your recommendation for the high school kids is to have them be remote learning sounds like for the majority of the year. What is the difference between the remote learning program and the flex program? And how do those differentiate between each other? Thank you for all your hard work, and I hope that you guys will be able to answer that question.
Thank you, Heidi. Great last name.
Thank you, Heidi. Next up, we have Jerry Ann May, followed by Brian DeBose and Edward Bloom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great.
Hi, thank you. I want to express my thanks to everyone. I appreciate your extremely hard work. I do not envy you at all, believe me. I just wanted to bring up a few points that haven't already been brought up. I am a parent of a daughter who is going into 10th grade at Amador, and she has had a 504 plan for anxiety and stress, directly related to school. Actually, she has anxiety attacks there at school due to a lot of times projects and things like that. Unfortunately, remote learning has also increased her anxiety. And I attended the town hall yesterday, and much of what was presented I saw was mostly on IEPs. So I have a question, and what I saw today was also on IEPs. I have a question on, do all the programs that were talked about IEPs also include 504s? In addition, on the remote learning, since it did increase her stress and anxiety, I really want to also stress that we need to look at mental and social health with these kids, especially, I know we're talking a lot about elementary kids and their specific needs, but these high schoolers and the middle schoolers, they have special needs as well. And that's the mental and social. My daughter misses her friends and her teachers so much. So please don't forget about that point. And then finally, I wanted to understand how, it's just a question and I'll be done. Finally, how are you going to ensure that while the kids are in remote learning, how are you going to check and make sure the kids are not falling behind, especially in high school? Because my daughter said when she was in the remote learning in the spring semester, she learned absolutely nothing. And I don't want that to happen again. I thank you for your time, and I really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. And next we have Brian DeVos, Edward Bloom, followed by Scott Bodensteiner. So, Brian, are you still with us? So
I am.
ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you. So my name is Brian Dubos. My family, we're residents of Pleasanton for 17 years. We have 3 kids in school, upcoming, 11th grade, 9th grade, and 7th grade. Much of and I realize this is more of a comment section than a question, so it'll be a little bit of a mixed bag of both. A lot of the discussion around going back to school has been based on data that's been driven by the Alameda County or generally by the state of California health departments. Noticing that the statistics for Pleasanton are much better or favorable than they are for the rest of the areas, specifically Alameda County, I echo some of the concerns earlier around why we're making some of our decisions based off of recommendations. And again, not direction, not requirements, but recommendations based off of statistics that don't follow where we are. We are in a better situation than some of the other areas in Alameda County and the state of California in general. What we have is an opportunity because of the numbers that we have here and the favorability that we have is to have our kids go back to school to get that world-class education that we're proud of. And I think we do have a wonderful school system, but it's important that we have the kids in school and available to be able to receive that education. So not really a question, more of a comment or concern related to make sure that the people aren't making an easy decision or a political decision based on numbers that are easy to quote and refer to when we're seeing here locally in our community are better than what we've seen around the rest of the state. Thank you all for the work you're doing. Hopefully we can all move forward and find back to an old normal and not a new normal.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, next We have Edward Bloom, but I'm not seeing him on our attendee list. All right, so we'll move on. Scott Bodensterner, and I believe that Cindy Johnson Eckersley was able to join us, so she'll be after Scott, followed by Laura Martinez, who is now with us. So Scott, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. I just wanted to echo what everybody else has expressed in terms of gratitude for all the hard work that the task force has put in, and for the opportunity for us all to speak at and contribute to this discussion. I just wanted to first say that I've got two kids, an 8th grader, or going into 9th grade, going into 7th grade, good students. But the remote learning at the end of the year last year ended up with, for both of them, a drastic diminishment in their learning capacity. And so tonight, when I first heard that that's how we're going to start this next school year, I literally got nauseous. So my question is, or my statement is that the first question on the frequently asked questions page on your back to school page is, why doesn't the school district have an option for students to return full time? And the answer that's provided is that the district has not been given the guidance from the county public health department to do that, which contradicts what I heard earlier on this conversation, that the county health department is not mandating any specific requirement for re-entry school, but providing guidelines for ensuring safety and minimization of viral spread, which are the same as we've all been hearing and have gotten used to: masking, hand hygiene, surface sanitation, and probably most importantly, social distancing. So in order to determine how these guidelines can be met, I wanted to ask whether the task force is, or will be exploring the feasibility of using the vast open space resources and facilities like our great gymnasiums, and how they can be put into place so that kids can come back to school on a full-time basis as soon as possible while ensuring social distancing and optimal learning. I feel like that is something that should have been looked into on day one of the shelter in place back in March. And so if you could put that as a question, as a follow-up to the frequently asked question number 1 on your webpage, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Scott. So Cindy, if you are with us, go ahead.
Hi, this is Cindy Eckersley. I'm an education specialist for students with moderate to severe needs working in a special day class at Harvest Park Middle School. I have over 20 years with POSD in this role. Thank you for this opportunity to let me talk to you for the decision to begin all students, including SDC, moderate to severe students, in distance learning. I would like to spend this time explaining why it is important that same age peers all transition at the same time when it is safe for them to return. The current plan has our 3rd through 12th grade students with moderate to severe needs returning to school earlier than the general education peers. This separation of treatment causes concerns in the following 3 areas. Safety for all. I don't understand how it can be safe for some students who return earlier to school than others. Safety practices. Most students with moderate to severe needs have challenges following the necessary 3 safety protocols. The first one being physical distancing. We have to maintain close contact with these students in situations involving feeding, toileting, teaching, training of life skills and behavior modification, including elopement, making it difficult to keep a well-ventilated classroom. The second safety protocol concerns the wearing of masks. Wearing and keeping on a mask for these students can be problematic due to the novelty and sensitivity to these items. The third safety protocol involves washing their hands properly and then keeping their hands away from their face and others. The third area of concern involves complications associated with separation from our general education peers. This is not an inclusive environment. They do not have access to same age general education peers, classes, and socialization opportunities that the TK through 2nd grade will have under your plan. Our students would be missing out on their minutes in general education by being placed in the most restrictive environment in an educational setting when we strive hard to have them in the least restrictive environment. In all your decision making when pertaining to our students, the safety and well-being of our staff, students, and their families should be considered carefully when finalizing reopening plans. Please have us come back to school when our general education peers return and when it is safe for all of us to return.
Thank you. Patrick,
All right, thank you.
how many more speakers do we have?
Thank you, Cindy. I was told that Laura Martinez would be joining us, but I actually don't see her on the attendee list.
Anybody
I
else?
just wanted to confirm quickly.
Because we need to extend the meeting. Well, maybe let me go back to the board so I could get an extension of time.
What are you asking, Steve?
I'd like to go back to the general board so I could ask for an extension of time.
No.
Okay, do I have a motion to extend the time? We're close to 10. We have
How much time do we have left?
Hour and 15 minutes worth of discussion items.
Plus this, finishing this.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I will move that we extend the meeting to 11:30.
I'll second.
Okay. Trustee Arkin,
Aye.
Trustee Yee,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Larson,
Aye.
Trustee Maher, aye. Passes. The time limit now is 11:30. So Patrick, we have no one else to speak on the comments?
I believe that we have Laura Martinez with us. And then after Laura, the only other comment that was submitted as a blue card, but is actually for this item, is Caitlin Saffredin.
Okay, well, let's go so we get moving. Laura?
Yes, I'm here. I've been here the whole night, so I'm sorry you guys couldn't find me earlier. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Haglund, Cabinet, and Community. As you have already heard, classified staff has been part of the task force and the reopening discussion since the beginning. And we have put in many hours over the summer, and we will continue this important work because we need to be very thoughtful in our reopening of schools. There are many important issues for our members that need to be negotiated. Number one is the safety of our students and staff for the reopening, as well as those already working and serving our kids in the Kids Summer Program and throughout the district. We were impacted recently by the budget reductions that were made with the budget cuts, and we are in bargaining on the effects and impacts of this. We still have a new contract to negotiate as well, and our negotiation team has been available and ready to negotiate. We have much work to do, and preparation is needed as we continue to work on the best plans for reopening that will be safe for all. Let's continue to work together and come up with the best plan. Thank you and good evening. Thank you for letting me in.
Thank you, Laura.
All right, thanks, Laura. Caitlin, would you still like to comment? I saw your name on the attendee list, so I just didn't want to make sure we didn't forget about you. Caitlin, go ahead if you're.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry for submitting probably the wrong color card here. But first, I want to reiterate my thanks to the board and everybody at the district for all they've done. And just a quick comment here, because I know you guys are really running over here, but I think really the support for parents, especially working parents, in making sure that we have the resources we need. We're not educators, and my child is going to be a first grader, and I felt wholly unprepared in the spring, and am slightly terrified of looking at this coming into the fall. And so, really treat us as aides. We need professional development in this area across the board, I think. And also more notice from the teachers about what the lesson plan will be for the coming weeks. Many times it was a Monday morning check-in, which was, just too late for working parents who have meetings. So those are my two comments. I really, again, appreciate everything. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
Is that it?
President Maher, that is it.
Okay. So
Take it
Dr.
away.
Hagen, would you like to explain the motion that we'll be voting on here one last time?
President Maher?
Yes.
There were a couple of questions that people asked that especially one, somebody asked about the difference between the Flex Academy and the remote learning. Can we have that answered?
Sure.
So let me do that. And I part of it is we've answered that question multiple times, and it's answered on the Q&A. So we want to make sure that people know where the resource documents are that they can go so they can take care of their questions by looking through the FAQs. So want to remind folks that those answers are available on the website. But just to take a swipe at it real quickly, the remote learning is a function of the hybrid model. So within the hybrid model, you have fully remote and fully back to school. We are starting the hybrid model fully remote. And as the health guidance provides the opportunity, we will slide that over into the back to class out of the fully remote. The Flex model is an independent program with PUSD teachers that's designed for folks that don't want to be subject to the sliding based on the guidance of the public health department. They just want to put their kids in a program where they know they're going to stay in a remote learning environment. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or concerns? Dave, would you like to move forward with the recommendation?
Sure. If I could get Dr. Vandekamp, if you're still awake, can you pull up that page of the presentation that has the list of recommendations towards the back? I think it's the third slide from the back of the presentation.
She's pulling it up right now, Dr. Hagman.
And maybe while she's doing that, can somebody tell me what page that is in the presentation so I don't have numbers on my printout here.
Should be 35.
Page number 35 on the presentation, which says final recommendations at the top. I'm just going to go ahead and read through them if I can. You all have it there, and as soon as she can pull it up, then everybody else will be able to see it. So the final recommendations, here it comes. Oh, Ahmed, tricky you. Okay, so there it is right there. The final recommendations are for our TK through 2 classes to go into the AM/PM model. And let me start off by saying that all of these models start with a full-time remote to begin with. But as they open up, as the guidelines permit, TK through 2 will open in a AM/PM model that is outlined.
Except for our preschool, correct?
Preschools, I think, we're going to go into the 212 if I remember. Ed, was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Good. I didn't have to be corrected 2 times. So the TK through 2 will